Okay. We are live, but if we could just hold for a moment and fix the view. Corey and Abby, do we have the slide up?
Yeah, we'll get that up momentarily.
Okay.
And we do have the applicant, so we can begin.
Sasha, go ahead.
Good morning. This is the Landmarks Preservation Commission's October 5th, 2021 public meeting. I'm going to call attendance now. Chair Carroll.
Here.
Vice Chair Bland.
Here.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Here.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chen.
Here.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Here.
Is that Commissioner?
Noting for the record, Commissioner Chapin is here.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Here.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Here.
Commissioner Jefferson. Commissioner Lefty.
Here.
Commissioner Holford Smith. Commissioner Holford. Okay.
Okay. Good morning.
Sarah?
Yeah.
Sarah, if I can just make a correction, this is the October 5th public meeting and public hearing of the Landmarks Commission.
Okay.
Great. Good morning and welcome to the October 5th public hearing and public meeting. Today's meeting will be held via Zoom and live streamed on YouTube. So if you're interested in watching the proceedings, you may do so by going to our YouTube channel. And if you would like to testify on any hearing items today, you may join the Zoom meeting at the time of the application. And instructions and estimated times are on our public hearing agenda and on our hearing page on our website. We will also display the Zoom meeting information on the screen when we are taking testimony for each public hearing item. Today, we will begin with a public meeting agenda to review applications that have already had a public hearing and are back today with a revised proposal in response to comments made by the Commission at the public hearing after listening to the presentation and to the public testimony. We will then move to our public hearing agenda to review new applications. And with that, I will turn it over to Corey Harala, our Director of Preservation.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. So as mentioned, we'll start today's Preservation Department agenda with public meeting items. First is item number 1, LPC 21-06055, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 2102, Lot 2, 267 Cumberland Street in the Fort Greene Historic District. This is a row house built in 1863, and the application is to construct a rear yard addition. This was last presented at the public hearing of July 27th, 2021, and no action was taken at that time. Please note that at the public hearing, commissioners agreed that a rear yard addition at this property could be appropriate, but had several concerns about the proposal. Specifically, several commissioners thought that the addition should either be reduced by 1 floor or reduced in depth to be coplanar with the neighbor or some combination thereof. There were also concerns regarding the stepped massing of the addition, cantilevered balcony, and composite wood cladding. Finally, though not under the commissioner's purview, concerns about a tree that could be affected by this proposal was raised during testimony. That the applicant is here to address these comments after we open the proceedings.
Great, thank you. And we'll go ahead and do that right now. So commissioners, those of you who are not unmuted, please look for my request to unmute. And Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
Motion to open the proceedings.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the applicants may begin.
Okay, commissioners, the applicant has control of the presentation. You need to state your name for the record and you may begin.
Hi, I'm Jenny Payson. Let me just get back to the front here. 1 second. Hello, my name is Jenny Payson and I'm the architect for this project at 267 Cumberland Street. I would like to thank you once again for the opportunity to present the revisions to this project this morning. As a reminder, the proposal we have for you today is for a rear yard addition to the existing building located at 267 Cumberland Street, which was initially presented to the Landmarks Commission on July 27th. No action was taken on the item at that time. So these photos are just to give you a quick refresher on the current building at 267 Cumberland. In the previous hearing, the primary concern we heard was regarding the proposed scale of the addition, with concerns over the impact this addition would have on the interior of the block. Several commissioners had recommended in the discussion to either reduce the height by 1 story or make the rear facade coplanar with the building to the north, 265 Cumberland. That's the red brick building there. Several of the commissioners also raised concerns over the proposed materiality, with a feeling that the wood accent was not consistent with the aesthetic of the historic district and that the brick would be a more contextual cladding solution. The third big concern we heard was that the large cantilevered second floor balcony lacked precedent and was out of context for the building. In the previous hearing, we also heard from several members of the public with concerns for the proposal, many of which were in line with the same comments we heard from the commissioners. However, they also raised concerns regarding the excavation that would result from construction and the potential damage to mature trees on the adjacent properties. We hope you will find that our revised proposal has carefully considered all of this feedback. I'll start by going through the major changes in this revised proposal. The first is the depth of the proposed addition, which has been reduced so that the rear facade of the addition will be coplanar with the adjacent building at 265 Cumberland. We felt that the reduction in depth rather than a reduction in height was warranted to better address concerns we heard from the commissioners and several members of the public. This would also minimize the amount of excavation and potential impact the construction would have on the mature trees. The second major change is to significantly reduce the size and aesthetic of the second floor balcony, which we feel is more consistent with the upper level balconies seen on adjacent properties. The new balcony design would be 3 feet deep as opposed to 5 feet previously, and only span a partial width of the building away from the lot line with 269 Cumberland as to not crowd over the townhouse to the south. Along with this, we have changed the proposed railings from cable rail that was previously proposed to a simple vertical iron rail, which is similar to the railing seen on adjacent properties. We have also eliminated the diagonal tension rods. The third significant change is that the rear wall of this new proposal will be faced with brick. We are aiming to simplify the materiality and blend this addition better with the historic district. So we have gone away from our previous proposal of stucco and wood. I would also go into this further in the upcoming slides. The last thing I would like to just mention, while it was discussed in the LPC hearing in July and determined to not be under the purview of LPC decisions, we did go ahead and hire an arborist to come and evaluate the impact of our proposed work on the river birch tree in our neighbor's lot. We have provided the commission with an arborist report, which found that the tree is relatively young and at not serious risk from the proposed construction.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I'm just skipping it.
Okay.
Just trying to get the slides forward. There we go. Here are several 3D drawings where you can see how the proposal has changed, with the facade being coplanar as well as the smaller second floor balcony. I would also like to point out that we have changed the stair from the first floor deck to the rear yard to be a spiral stair, as to pull all excavation as far away from the house and the interior of the block at 147C Lafayette. This is an updated rendering of the new proposal next to the old proposal. Again, highlighting the change in materiality from stucco and wood to brick. We are also proposing to lighten the color of all the painted metal so that it's not such a stark black as was previously presented. I wanted to bring this photo back to your attention, which is of the context directly across the inside of the block from 267 Cumberland. We revisited the surrounding context to help understand the propriety of our balcony proposal and make sure that the proportions are in keeping with the existing building fabric. As you can see here, several buildings have similar balconies in the upper level, specifically the one seen on the white building, 318 Carlton. The revised materiality in this proposal, as I mentioned, is to face the rear facade with brick. We've tentatively selected this lighter blend from Peterson Teagle. We're proposing to create several feature moments using stepped coursing to create frames around the openings, as well as decorative spandrel area between the parlor and second floor windows of the brick, stepping in and out in a vertical pattern. We have picked a neutral paint shade, Elmira White, which would be used for the party walls, as well as the top floor brick facade that will remain. We're also proposing a charcoal color, deep space, for all of the windows and metal accents, which is a lighter tone than the black we had previously proposed. Here's the existing elevation of the rear facade. And here's the proposed elevation with the callouts to those brick coursing details that I had mentioned. This is the existing proposed north elevations. We are proposing several new openings in the north elevation, as well as a new roof railing to be reviewed at step level. Existing and proposed south elevations. Again, just to emphasize the depth of the rear addition in relation to 269 and 147C Lafayette buildings along the southern lot line. The updated block plan. We hope that you'll see that the proposed addition fits well within the parameters of the other rear yard additions found on this block. This is a photo showing the one angle at which the addition will be visible. As you can see, the sidewall is viewed at such an oblique angle through a 30-inch walkway between 265 and 267 Cumberland. Because of this, we are proposing to finish the sidewall of the addition with stucco to match the existing sidewall, so that the addition is not discernible from the existing building. These are just the floor plans, which I'll skip over. And that's all I have for you today. I'd like to thank you again for your time, and I'm looking forward to your feedback.
Great, thank you very much. And we did receive the arborist report, as you mentioned, and it was shared with all of the commissioners.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? Okay, I don't see any questions, so I think we may be ready to move to our discussion. I am sending requests to unmute all of you. So that
Sarah, I did have a question.
Yes,
Sorry.
please go ahead.
Couldn't get my hand raised fast. I was unclear on the top level whether I think the masonry openings are not changed except to lower one in order to make a door, which we do all the time. But was the brick changed to the Peterson brick to match the below, or is it the same brick that exists now?
It's the existing brick. We're just going to repaint it to match the sidewalls.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, other questions? Okay, so why don't we go ahead and begin our discussion. So as was presented, this was an addition that came before us, and after reviewing it and listening to testimony, we asked that the applicants reduce the size of the addition either by height and or depth, and change the materiality and restudy the balconies. And so they have made changes in all respects. They've pulled it back to align with the adjacent building, changed the material to brick, and have restudied the fenestration and balconies, and provided the context, which shows other similarly sized additions and balconies. So let's begin our discussion. Commissioner Lutfi, would you like to start this one?
Sure. So I wasn't here for the prior meeting, but in looking everything over, of course, I agree with my fellow commissioners' comments. And I think this is a very successful response. Overall, I would say it's much more muted, on every level. The, just the reduction in the depth so that the building aligns makes sense. The reduced cantilever, the bricks, and also the palette. So I can approve this.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
I was here. I don't think I was one of the more vocal commissioners on this one. I agreed with the previous comments, and I appreciate that they've responded to all of those comments. And in particular, I appreciate the fact they went to the trouble of doing the arborist report. Which was not necessary, but terrific. That said, I think the final result is appropriate. And I had the same question Fred had, and I got the answer. So that's it.
Okay, great. Commissioner Shamir Baran.
I agree. I think they've been very responsive, and the project is improved. Very much improved, so I think it's appropriate to approve the project.
Thank you. Commissioner Chapin?
Yes, I think they have been responsive to our comments, and I think it's at this point very approvable.
All right, thanks. Commissioner Goldblum,
I agree, appropriate.
Commissioner Devonshire,
I agree, it's appropriate.
and Commissioner Chen,
Same here.
and Commissioner Bland.
Same here. I just want to comment though and say that it's clear that the applicant and the owner apparently wanted a contemporary addition, which we allow a lot. And I think they've still achieved it, even with all these changes, and it made it much more appropriate within the context of a complex rear yard. That picture that they showed us shows an incredible array of additions and changes. So I think they've been able to keep to their guns, but also keep to our guns too, and make it more appropriate. So I think it's a very nice scheme now.
Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion?
Sure. In the matter of docket 21-06055, 267 Cumberland Street in the Fort Greene Historic District, a row house built in 1863. The application is to construct a rear yard addition. I note that the building's scale, materials, and details are among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Fort Greene Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the proposed work will not eliminate or damage any significant architectural features, that the addition will not rise to the full height of the building, thereby helping to retain the building's original scale and massing, that the addition will not project further into the rear yard than the majority of other existing rear additions in this block, and will not diminish the presence of the rear yard or the central green space, that the coplanar alignment of the rear facade of the addition of the neighboring building and its simple massing will help the addition to harmonize with its surrounding context, that the proposed cladding materials will be in keeping with materials commonly found at secondary facades at this block, that the contemporary design of the addition featuring asymmetrical window and door assemblies and a balcony will be in keeping with the types of modern additions and accretions, including balconies and upper level porches found within this block, that the side of the addition, if seen at all from a public thoroughfare, will only be minimally visible through a narrow gap in the street wall, and that the work will not detract from the special architectural or historic character of the building or historic district.
Thank you. And Commissioner Gustafson, would you second the motion?
Second.
Thank you. Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, we'll move to the next item.
Next is public meeting item number 2, LPC 20-01971, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 215, lot 21, 27 Cranberry Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. This is currently a vacant lot, and the application is to construct a new building. This was last presented at the public hearing of October 8, 2019, and no action was taken at that time. And the staff will walk us through the revised proposal, but the applicant is here to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Why don't we have the presentation and then we'll see if we need to open it up for the applicant.
Good morning, Commissioners. Julianne Wiesner-Kinesi, Preservation Staff. The proposal as presented on October 8th, 2019 is for the construction of a new building, which was originally approved by the Commission in 2011, but the permit expired before the building was constructed. The only work that has taken place so far has been some excavation. At the public hearing, the Commissioners found that the presentation lacked sufficient documentation of the broader context within which the new building would be located, the existing rear yard conditions, the projection of the new building into the rear yard, and the maximum visibility of the rooftop addition and associated rooftop installations. The applicant has submitted a revised presentation, which I will now walk you through, beginning with an overall photo of the site and followed by maps of the historic district and block, which I might have skipped over. Here they are. The block plan illustrates the varied conditions within this block. And the following slides illustrate the existing conditions at Cranberry Street and the adjacent blocks. The subject property is outlined in red for ease of identification. And these slides provide context of the proposed building site within Cranberry Street. It's here at an oblique view, and not in this image, it's the other side of the street. But the images show the variety of building styles, heights, and materials that are found within the area. These slides identify typical features of brick buildings throughout the district, including metal framing at projecting elements, brownstone stucco clad precast concrete, and bay windows. And then here we are at the site itself, and this image shows the existing conditions at the site and rear yard, including the excavation that's taken place so far. And these images illustrate the conditions at the interior of the block and the adjacent buildings. This is a photo montage of the proposed new building. There have been a couple of modifications to the design. So in this slide, the previous proposal seen at the public hearing is shown on the left, and the slightly revised design is shown on the right. Note that the visibility of the rooftop addition that's seen in the previous version is due to a rendering error. There will not be any visibility of the rooftop addition over the front facade. Changes to the design include reducing the expanse of brick between the cornice and top floor windows by raising the windows and elongating the cornice. Here is the rooftop addition seen from the corner of Cranberry and Willow Street. And then from further along Cranberry. And again, the rooftop addition will not be visible over the front facade of the building, nor from further west on Cranberry Street. This is an aerial image showing the proposed building within the context of the interior of the block. The proposed building has been rendered in here. The new building will be visible from Middaugh Street. And that's been illustrated here. We'll see the very top of the rear facade and then a portion of the rooftop addition. This slide identifies the various materials that are proposed for the building, which are consistent with what was shown at the very original proposal. And the following slides are elevations of the various facades of the building, side, other side, and rear. And there are building sections as well as some detail sections and floor plans as well. So the applicant is available for any questions.
Okay, thank you, Julianne. And I think we do have some questions. So why don't we first go ahead and make a motion to open the proceedings. I'm just sending a request to unmute all of you so that we can do that. Commissioner Gustafson, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
And Commissioner Chen, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. We're going to start with Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, thanks. I didn't get this one last time, so forgive me if I'm running over old material. So the house is proposing to use a Roman brick.
That is correct.
Is it a red brick similar to the building next door, or an iron spot, or what?
We have a sample. I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. And just
Okay.
state your name for the record.
Hi, this is David Freya, Precon Design. Thank you for the opportunity to present this project to you.
Okay,
And
there
so
it is.
we have a color chart at the very end in the appendix.
Yeah, I see it.
Which will show you exactly what we're planning to use there.
Got it.
So yes, it
All
does
right.
have a red spot to it.
And
And it's
just
slightly of a brownish color.
Got it. And explain to me the idea of the bay window where you're looking out in one direction at the party wall of your neighbor. Right? Aren't you? I mean, when you're looking to the right, if you're looking at the building from here, you're looking here. You're looking to the right in your bay window. You're kind of staring into the side wall of that building, right?
Correct. So the building has been set back approximately 5 feet to align with the building to the left of us, if I'm facing the building. And so that portion of the wall that's exposed, we've had discussions with the neighbor of possibly, trying to paint it or doing whatever we can to sort of make it more presentable. At this point, it's somewhat unfinished just because it's been exposed to the elements. But that's really what we're planning to do there, is hopefully just clean it up a bit.
And what happens on the side wall to the left? Is that stucco? Is it brick?
Side wall to the left.
Next to your wooden neighbor. Yeah, there. What we're seeing there. What is that brown stuff?
Sorry, let me just zoom in there. That's also brick. So we have brick all along the perimeter of the building.
So is that the face brick or is that the rear yard brick?
It's a rear yard brick. The only difference between the two is that there's a slightly different texture on it.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Other questions? All right, I'm not seeing other questions. Let me just note that we did get a letter from the Brooklyn Heights Association strongly objecting to the application in terms of its design, size, and scale. I just want to turn to the applicant and see if there's any final comment you'd like to make about how this fits within the context before we move to our discussion.
Sure. Well, we've had meetings with the community board and also the Brooklyn Heights Association. With both communities, we've sort of tried to listen to their concerns and reply to them in a way that we felt would work for the community, for the neighborhood, for the street, and also for our client, so that we really had a cohesive approach to this project. And I think that we've made a lot of accommodations in terms of the sizing, the scale, setting back the building, materials, and also of the design of the building to accommodate some of the elements that we've seen in the neighborhood, like the bay window, the type of window treatments, and the materials that we've selected. So I think that we've tried to our best ability to really accommodate all of the concerns that have been raised.
All right, and commissioners, if there are no final questions, we'll go ahead and move to our discussion. Yes, Commissioner Bland, please go ahead.
One question. I just wanted to verify for sure. I think I heard that the building has been pushed back, so it's coplanar with number 25 on the left. Is that right?
Yes, it's maybe within an inch or two, but it's definitely set back for that purpose.
Right. Now, what does that mean for it in terms of the building on its right? Is it coplanar with that building as well?
No. So that building to the right of us is at the property line.
So your new proposed building is set considerably back, several feet back from.
Correct. Approximately 5 feet.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, Commissioner Devonshire.
Thank you. Could you explain, please, the design decisions regarding the stoop, which color-wise does not appear to match the stone lintel above the door, and it actually looks very much like stoops that have been modified in Brooklyn and are very heavy with just a little bit of iron. Can you explain how you got to that design?
Sure. Well, what we wanted to do was, going through the neighborhood, we did see a number of stoops that were very similar to this, and it appealed to us. And so we were trying to duplicate that. And in terms of the coloring, I think maybe it doesn't show that. All right, I'm going to close that. What we're trying to do is have all of the stucco match the same. It'll be all the same brown stucco color. So I think that perhaps the rendering doesn't show it as such, but all of the elements that are to be in stucco will be the same tone and color.
It hopefully darker like the lintel?
Correct. Darker like the lintel.
Right.
And again, we have a sample in our appendix, and I can, happily submit a physical sample so you can see exactly what we're talking about.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
All right, and Commissioner Bland, did you have another question?
Yes, I do.
Okay,
Sorry.
great. That's okay.
Coming to me as
Great.
I'm digesting this. Some of the renderings show the brick to be almost a chocolatey color, approaching the color of the house to the left, the wooden house to the left with shingles. And others like this make it appear as if it's a red brick. I missed what it's to actually be.
It's going to be sort of a reddish brown color. And again, I think the physical sample will probably be the best thing to look at. It will be somewhere in between the two buildings, between our left and our right side.
Okay.
And
it's like a honey colored iron spot.
Yeah, I think the difference in the renderings probably has to do with the way that the light hits the building and the way that the computer starts to render those things based on the light projections. But it will be the same color throughout.
And it was stated that the penthouse addition is not visible.
Not if you're facing the building directly from the front.
Right, but I don't see how it's not visible from looking over 25. It would have to, yeah, there it is. It's
right.
Okay.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Okay, then we might be ready to move to our discussion. So for those of you who are still muted, I just sent a request to unmute you. So we're going to begin this discussion. As Julianne presented, this is a project that was approved and was and the permit expired, and they came back to us and we asked for more information on the context. We asked for some clarification on the visibility of the setback top floor, and we asked for some proportional changes at the top, and where you can see that the applicants have lowered the cornice and raised the top floor windows. So we'll begin our discussion. Commissioner Bland, would you please start this one?
I had a hunch you were going to ask me to start. Well, let me just say a few things about this little section of Brooklyn Heights, which is the oldest part of the developed part of Brooklyn Heights. And that's why you see so many wooden houses here. It's a very fragile, delicate scaled area. Many of the houses dating before 1828, which I think is the year that the laws changed and no longer wood was allowed. But that's not the only part of the context. The context, as was duly noted in the presentation, has other buildings as well. But there is a sort of fragility and delicate quality to this part of the Heights, which I think is rare and beautiful. Somehow I had forgotten this design. I wonder if I even saw it before. I think I would have remembered it, but maybe I was absent. in any event, it seems to me as if this, you've gone around the neighborhood and collected, balconies from here, a stoop from there, et cetera, which is not always the right way to design a building, I think, but not a bad way to at least understand the context. So I think there are a few things that I still think need further looking at here, but I think the basic direction is not inappropriate. And what I mean by that is it has a contemporary quality, but a highly contextual quality, which I think is appropriate. It's been noted that the stoop seems overly grand or big or beefy or something, kind of out of scale. I think that needs a little more work. Some of the detailing of the cornice maybe is a little bit clunky right now. I think the double bay window approach is interesting. It even recalls maybe a little bit some of the Willow Place contemporary buildings from the 1960s, which I think are still loved in the neighborhood, even though they're very different in the historic context. And I think for me, the most problematic issue is the scale of the bulkhead. I think seen over the incredibly delicate and beautiful little wooden house to the left, number 25, it's just an inappropriately big, bulky thing on top that's quite visible because of the delicate and small scale nature of number 25. So I would think that should be quite reduced in size and somehow calling much less attention to it, however one might do that. The building does stick out. We're not looking at it here. It sticks into the donut quite far. I'm interested to hear about others thinking about that. There is a polyglot nature of that donut. I accept that. I'm not sure I'm against what's being proposed here in terms of extending into the rear yard, but I'd like to hear others think about it. It certainly stretches the limit of what it should be, and I'm wondering if it shouldn't be pulled back a little bit. So all of those little things are relatively little, and I think correctable from my point of view. And I do think the basic direction of the project is not inappropriate, as I mentioned, but I'm not prepared to say it's acceptable right today.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
This is the first time I'm seeing this project overall. And I want to just echo some of the things that Fred said. I think I think overall it's a very nice project, and I think it's very respectful of the overall context here and the history in terms of the street and the neighborhood and the architecture, but it wants to make a more modern statement. I think it does it in a very understated way. I happen to agree with what Fred and Michael said in terms of the stoop. It seems very heavy, and it doesn't seem to go with the building at all. And maybe there should be a little more metal there. I'm not sure, but I think it needs to be addressed. I'm a little sorry to hear that the color is going to be brown, because there's something about this palette here that not only speaks to the building next to it, if that's an accurate color, to the right, my right as I'm looking at the screen, but just the whole, I kept thinking of Cranberry Street, and it just seemed to work for me on a number of levels. And it's soft, and I don't know, you might want to think about that. I think Fred's other comments about the bulkhead are right on. I think that could be looked at. a little bit. And I'm kind of up in the air about whether or not it projects too far into the back, and I'm interested in what other commissioners have to say.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Gustafson.
Geez, I don't remember seeing this either, so maybe it was, I don't know. I hope someone recalls it before we get through this. I agree largely with Fred's comments. I think there are a lot of good things going on here in terms of the certainly the scale of the front of the building, the materials, punched openings, etc. I agree the stairway's too beefy. His comment on the clunkiness of the cornice and that the bulkhead is too big. On the donut, the incursion into the donut, I think looking at it from the overhead view, it's not a pristine donut. It's been compromised in any number of unusual ways. And so I'm not concerned about how deeply this design goes into the donut. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Baron.
Thanks. Did I miss, have we seen an image, and I've heard of what was originally here?
Corey?
Because I don't think I've seen it.
Or Julianne, do we have a tax photo or something that shows what predates the vacant lot?
It is not in the current presentation, and I'm having trouble remembering that myself. Julianne, do you have that information?
I do not.
Or does the applicant, can you speak to that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't sure if I was able to speak.
Oh, yeah,
So-
sorry. You're correct, actually. You're not allowed to speak.
But I can speak now.
We have to open the proceedings again. So, all right, let's quickly have a motion to open the proceedings.
So moved.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, please go ahead and answer the question.
Okay, no, I do not have any documentation of what was there prior to just the vacant lot. I think that it's, from what I understand, it's always been a garden.
Yeah. And you understand that how? Is there?
From looking at the previous documentation on the project, I became involved with this project later on after the initial approval from 2011. I became involved in 2014. But when I looked at the old documentation, it did show something with regards to, in terms of writing, of what the lot had been used as before, which was a garden, I believe.
Addie, if I could interrupt,
Yeah.
I've only been walking by this site for 50 years now, 49 and a half to be specific. And I think that's true. It's always been vacant. I think there was a car parked in there for a long time, but anyway, so I don't recall anything either. Obviously there was something there at some point, but it's been gone for a long time.
Right. No, and I'm wondering if there are any sandworm, I don't want to belabor this, but are there any maps that show that there was a building there? Was it really actually a garden for an adjacent building always, for the house?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
You may be able to pull an image quickly, maybe not in time for your discussion right now, Commissioner, but maybe before we're done here. So we'll do our best.
Thank you. And I'm asking because I find this to be a very challenging situation, which is, I mean, I think, firstly, the fact that Brooklyn Heights Association has rejected it is an issue, or speaks to the fact that it's a complicated proposal, and I'm trying to get my head around why it is that it is so difficult. And I very much appreciate Commissioner Bland's, very careful development of specific tactics that could improve some of the things that seem, whether scale or materiality or size, a little bit off. And yet I don't even know that that's, I'm concerned that I just actually don't know that that's even still our role with respect to this project. So, it's obviously not a a perfect kind of historic specimen. They did not recreate a cornice, recreate the historic bay window. They didn't use the same lintels or anything. And so it's not that, and it's also not a really sort of well distinguished, sort of distinguished from the historic in a contemporary or even sort of modern style. Like, we're squinting at it going, what exact style is this? We don't quite know. And I think, and at the same time, as Commissioner Lutfi pointed out, they are respectful. They've been responsive to input about setbacks, about materiality, about size. So I don't know. So there's nothing. Is that what we're understanding? There's nothing there in 1940. Yeah.
Yeah, there's two images, one from another direction that show the same thing with some sort of, looks like construction wall, or maybe it's just a wood fence. I don't know, in front of it.
Yeah. And so I find this to be a really tough one to, there are things about it I don't like, but is that what we are supposed to be doing with respect to new buildings in very sensitive historic districts? And as Commissioner Bland said, sort of fragile ones, where the recreation of something that approached that kind of the historic scale would not necessarily be possible. Anyway, I'm having a really hard time with this, because there are so many things about it I don't like, but I don't know that it's my role to reject or find inappropriate what's been presented. Against what exactly? And so that's why I was looking for sort of, all right, since I have no idea what really was the original structure here, is there any way that it could be returned to somehow, that moment? But we don't see that either. So I'm struggling.
Right. So I think,
Commissioner, if I can just speak up for a second, I think that appropriateness does not require you to copy, even reference what was there historically. So appropriateness involves new construction as it relates to the buildings and the streetscape. I mean, the commission has approved a number of contemporary buildings in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District, as well as a number of, more sort of traditional or background buildings. I don't know how you would want to describe them.
But see, that's my point. I don't think it's inappropriate. Exactly my point. I
think if you don't think it's inappropriate, then I think that answers your question, right? In other words, you shouldn't, if you think this meets the criteria of appropriateness, then you should support it. And I think that's and not support it for some other reason.
No. So I didn't complete my thought here. I have no way to find how not to support it. And so I don't find myself able to make the kind of the modifications, the suggestions that Commissioner Bland was ever able to make, but I also don't understand the Brooklyn Heights Association's outright rejection of it too. Sort of, I'm trying to understand all of those things, but as I've explained, I find it hard to say that it is inappropriate.
okay. All right. And right. And the sort of the aspects of it that we can really comment on would be sort of the height and the width. Are they typical of other buildings in the district? The materiality, the general fenestration pattern, the design, even if abstract or contemporary, does it have relationships to the style, scale, materials, and details of the district? And then the depth was something that the Brooklyn Heights Association also objected to, which has been discussed on the table. Okay, Commissioner Chapin. Diana, can you hear me? Commissioner Chapin? Diana?
Yeah, my service is, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
It's been, my service has been going in and out for some reason. I'm on the phone now and trying to, but anyway, I basically, if you can hear me, I basically share Commissioner Bland's comments. And I did kind of, I felt that also the bay window to me, I think it may just be the rendering. The side view looks pretty good, but it bothers me a bit. I know it's the color or what it is, but it seems to kind of call attention to itself. I don't have a problem with a bay window entirely, but in general, I agree with the comments, including the stoop and perhaps having the rear not extend quite so far, and some of the materials and color comments. Did you get that?
I did. Thank you. Okay, Commissioner Goldblum.
Okay, thanks. This must have been reviewed at the other Landmarks Preservation Commission, because I too don't remember seeing this at all. But I think I share Adi's kind of conundrums. I really didn't know what to do with this building, which I think has many things that cause me to pause. And then I took a virtual walk on the block just now, and it really changed my view of this building from one that is generic in its historicist approach and therefore perhaps appropriate as a background building, to one that in its generic dropped in from the file quality misses the essence of what this block is. Walking down this block just now, I was bowled over by how diverse it is, how varied it is in so many ways that we aren't used to seeing, or at least I'm not used to seeing, in blocks of brownstone Brooklyn. It's varied in plane, in height, in space. You walk down this block, there's gaps to the center. There's buildings that are facing sideways, buildings that are facing forward. There are carriage houses, garages, tiny houses, big houses, and they all kind of flow together in this very, very eclectic way that, without seeming to have been planned as such, create a mellifluous flow. And this kind of just sits there like something very heavy in your stomach. It doesn't feel like it's trying to play the game that the block is playing. It's very generic. And the generic quality for me comes from the choices made that Fred identified as well. You know, they're taking a kit of parts from various brownstone, Brooklyn additions or renovations that have been done over time. The general facade is a kind of a Georgian-ish, very simple, planar facade with punched windows with simple brownstone lintels. Yet the brick is a more Victorian or a more neoclassical Roman iron spot brick, which is a very beautiful and decorative brick, but you don't see it on this kind of building. You see a very flat, flat orange on this kind of building. The bay window feels very 60s-ish, 70s, like Fred alluded to. It lacks detail, and it's also kind of, for me, in an odd place. Why would you put a bay window with vertically oriented side walls right next to a party wall? Why wouldn't you just flip the party and put the bay window on the other side, put the stoop next to the house? That's, there's no sense of engagement with the irregularities of the block that this building is trying to negotiate and fit into. And so for me, it's kind of generic qualities render it inappropriate for its particular very, very remarkable location. In terms of the back, I think that the height is fine. I think that the addition is fine. I think, though, that the cornice should be removed from the back. There's a cornice on the back, a stepped cornice similar to the one on the front, that makes it look, when you look over the buildings on Middaugh Street, it makes it look like you're looking at the front of another building. I think that problem also extends to the choice of the party wall and rear wall brick. The use of the iron spot, I think it's a wire cut brick. It's a front of building brick. And I think that you need to have, I think the difference between the front facade and the side and rear are not strong enough to create the sense that those facades are not front of building facades. I think it would be confusing and kind of weird and disorienting to have a Roman iron spot rear and party wall brick on this building.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
Oh, someone must have been at the previous hearing. Memory is the first thing to go, and the memory loss is the best defense. I agree 100% with Commissioner Goldblum's comments about the rear. And with regard to the front of this house, I agree also with Michael somewhat, and with Adi, and with Fred. There is a value of this house because it doesn't sort of overwhelm what's around us. The appropriateness in my case comes with its ability to coexist with that wooden building next door, and perhaps the rest of the streetscape with which I'm not completely familiar. That said, it is what's troubling me about it, and it doesn't shout in that way. What's troubling me about it in general, however, is that what Michael mentioned, that sort of kit of parts, that the bay window, which evokes to me a Amherst, UMass Amherst dormitory bay window effect, the stoop, which is very appropriate on some buildings, is far too heavy. It's far too massive on this building. And so it may be a kit of parts. And as the applicant said, they looked at things around the neighborhood that they liked. Well, perhaps they should have looked further. I mean, there can be a delicacy about this facade that they just don't make. And as a result, it's not, I would have to say, ultimately, I find it not appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm not going to jump into further confuse the applicant, given that the sentiment seems to be, and I agree with many of the comments of the commissioners and the colleagues, that especially with Goldblum and Adi, that I don't necessarily find it inappropriate, as Mark said. But I think that the sentiment seems to be that there's a lot of details that need to be tweaked and refined, and so I would defer to especially to Fred Bland, that's so knowledgeable about this historic district, and that this is one of those very precious gems in our neighborhood, and so therefore I would defer to his expertise and the rest of the colleagues.
Okay, great. All right.
Such pressure. But since he gave me an opening, can I say?
Of course, please do.
Very interesting conversation, and I think it's appropriate. It's just, there's no block. There's no, you can't duplicate any block, but this block is a completely unique place. It really is a very, very special place. So it's worthy of the conversation we've just had. Of all the comments I've just heard, many of which I think were repetitive and therefore important, the most interesting and unique comment was made by Michael Goldblum, who said, why don't you flip the whole party and have the door on the other side? Of course, I don't know the whole layout, why you couldn't do that, but that would be such a kinder, gentler approach, I think, to the shingle style or shingle house to its left. I think that would be a very interesting change and perhaps much better. One other thing I noted in looking at those historic photos that Corey found so quickly for us, which was great. Those pictures show that the wood house to the left, number 25, had a stucco side wall. And of course, now we're seeing that it doesn't. So I'm thinking that if that's an initial condition, that there might have been a house there at some point, as opposed to a permanently organized garden, side garden, which Brooklyn Heights does have a few of, by the way. But it seems as if these shingles have been added in the last 40 or 50 years on the side, which make it seem now as if it might have been, facing a garden. It probably would have had windows opening into it as well. So anyway, to the point of Addie's consternation about how to proceed on this thing, if that house was meant to have a garden to the side, you could look at the picture that we're looking at now and say, well, maybe it was. But if you look at those historic photos, you can say, well, maybe it wasn't. So anyway, that's enough of blabber by me, but I will sign off at this point. Thank you.
That's helpful, and I appreciate that observation. I think that helps in the discussion. And so we won't take an action today. We'll ask the applicant to see if they can look a little bit more into the historic development of the block and how this lot evolved over time. And I think it's a good point to note that that side facade of the wood house was different in the tax photo in a way that may indicate that it wasn't facing a garden. And in any event, in terms of a building here, I think that, that there's still comfort level that there can be a building here, but the commission has had a very thoughtful discussion about how the details and materials and expression can relate better to the very unique eclecticism found within this street, and how to think about these details in a way that speak to the neighbors in the same way they speak to each other. So we won't take an action, and we'll ask the applicant to continue to work with the staff to develop their proposal, and we'll have them back when they have a revised design. Thank you. So we'll move to the next item now. Thank you.
The next item is public meeting item number 3, LPC 22-01740. This is an application for an amendment, Borough of Manhattan, Block 231, Lot 3, 305 Canal Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. This is an Italianate style store and loft building constructed circa 1863, and the application is to modify a master plan approved under Certificate of Appropriateness 17-8014 governing the future installation of painted wall signs. And I believe the staff will be making this presentation this morning.
Good morning, Commissioners. Dina Tass-Winter, Preservation Staff. The application before you is 305 Canal Street, located between Broadway and Mercer Street in the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. The proposal is to amend a master plan governing the future installation of a painted wall sign located at the secondary east elevation facing Broadway. Certificate of Appropriateness 13-7509 was issued in October 2012, establishing a master plan governing the future installation of painted wall signs at this location. And Certificate of Appropriateness 17-8014 was subsequently issued in October 2015, renewing the master plan for 10 years. This master plan placed restrictions regarding the amount of space the content of the sign can occupy versus the background, as well as the number of colors that can be used for a graphic or photorealistic sign. The proposal before you now is to modify that master plan by removing the content restrictions within the approved sign space in accordance with other recent painted wall sign master plans approved by the Commission, and to add a dimension of 3 inches to the border, which is in keeping with recommendations made by staff in a presentation at a public hearing in March 2019. The current 10-year timeframe will remain, so this master plan will be valid until October 2025. These photographs illustrate the visibility of the painted wall sign from various vantage points along Canal Street and Broadway. Commissioners will note that no other commission-approved painted signs are visible in conjunction with this sign. And the following slide includes examples of other approved painted wall signs for which the content restrictions have been removed throughout the district. And then these are recent signs that were approved by commission staff under the existing master plan at the subject premises. Note that each iteration of the sign will continue to include a solid black or white border in contrast with the contents of the sign, and that the vendor tag has already been approved at this location, which is consistent with other painted wall sign approvals throughout the district. The applicant is here to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions? I just have one question. And so I'm going to ask that we open the proceedings. Commissioner Shamir Baron, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that?
Second.
And let's call a vote on it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. So I just wanted to ask the applicant, and when you answer, if you could just state your name for the record. But you know, I know that this is an earlier master plan that was approved prior to our sort of developing a new policy or standard for these applications, and that the new proposal is aligned with our current practice, However, I think that we normally do request that the signs be pulled back from the front facade, even though historically they were often at the facade. So I just wanted to ask you about the choice of that location and had you considered pulling it back from the facade?
Good morning. This is Jonathan Harris from Colossal Media. We took this location over as a grandfathered non-conforming DOB permit from two billboard structures that were located on this facade. So by the time we brought this to the LPC for the first hearing, the permit and location and setbacks were already grandfathered in their location. And so we can't adjust this sign space on this facade.
Okay, so are you saying that the location was approved under our earlier master plan?
Yes.
I see. Okay, so we already approved that amount of setback. Got it.
Yes, and further, this was put here in the 70s by old high billboard structures. And since the zoning code would not allow for this sign space to be where it is now, so it's grandfathered in its location.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Sarah, it's Mark. So I think if what I'm hearing correctly is that you're saying that this is a sign that predates the designation of the district, and therefore has been grandfathered in terms of its size and location by DOB. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know if it predates the designation, but it's a non-conforming sign space with the DOB.
Because it's too big under current zoning.
Correct.
Okay. So it's too big under current zoning, but it's based on a size and a location that dates back to about 1970. And I think what I also understood is that when we previously approved the master plan for this site, we considered that factor and allowed for the new sign to fit within this size and location. Maybe staff, if you can just confirm that.
That's our understanding as well. I mean, the first certificate of appropriateness that we have on record, it dates from 1999. And then there were subsequent permits issued to convert it to a master plan since that time.
Okay. And so it always worked within this space. Got it. Okay. Any other questions, commissioners? All right. Why don't we begin our discussion. and start. And I think, as Corey said, this was a sign that we originally approved under a certificate of appropriateness in 1999, and then there were subsequent approvals to convert it to a master plan under sort of the old criteria we were using. And this is now a new application to convert this master plan to meet the current criteria that we are applying to wall signs. So let's go ahead and start our discussion. Commissioner Chen, would you start this one?
Yes, I do have a question for Mark. Given what the applicant just stated, what is your guidance in terms of something that's previously existed and to their understanding that they obviously, is non-compliant, and should it stay within that original line, or should we, the commission, ask for a setback?
Make sure it's my understanding that since we were approving this sign, that it's not something that its size and location are necessarily mandated by the zoning. So I think back in the 90s we were approving signs that were bigger, and there was a different sort of approach that has slowly been adopted over the years as we've required signs to get smaller, and we've inserted more criteria. So I think that it is fine for the commission if it wants to make additional requirements in exchange for giving the applicant a little more, a freer hand in terms of not having to come for all of to the staff to meet all these criteria. That we can adjust the location, size, and whatever of the approval.
Yeah.
But I would note that, we have also approved this under more recent master plans, and that according to this presentation, it says that the sign space occupies 20% of the visible portion of the secondary facade, which is consistent with our current approvals.
That's correct.
Yeah, so thank you for that clarification. I personally do not have problem with the current setback as it is.
Okay, all right, so appropriate. Okay, Commissioner Devonshire?
I have no problem with this.
Okay. Commissioner Goldblum?
Me neither.
Commissioner Chapin?
I can approve.
Okay. Commissioner Shamir Barron?
Yeah, I think I can too. I mean, it actually has a 70s vibe that how close it is to the edges. So I can approve. I think it's appropriate.
Okay. Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I agree.
And Commissioner Lutfi?
I concur.
And Commissioner Bland?
Well, I would push it back a little bit if I were in the majority, but I'm not. So I guess it'll go along and be as it is.
Okay, thank you. And, I think I sort of raised it because I'm used to us seeing them pushed back, but I would also note that historically they actually were always sort of pushed as close to the facade as this. So in that context, and the fact that we've done previous approvals here for this particular size and location, I'll support it as well. Okay, so Commissioner Chen, do you have the motion? Can you?
Yes, I do have it in front of me, so I'll read this case.
Thank you.
In the matter of LPC 22-01740, 305 Canal Street, Soho, Cast Iron Historic District. The application is to modify a master plan approved under Certificate of Appropriateness 17-08014, governing the future installation of painted wall signs, noting the building style, scale, materials, and details among the features that contribute to the special architectural and historic character of the Soho Cast Iron Historic District. I recommend approval, finding that the combination of the size and overall placement of the sign will keep it and remain a subordinate presence of the building within the streetscape, regardless of the type of graphics or number of colors used within the body of the sign. That the sign will include a 3-inch solid painted border in either black or white, to contrast with the content of the sign, a typical feature of historic wall signs, and that the revised scope is in keeping with the intent of original approval.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire, would you second the motion?
I second that motion.
Thank you. And Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin. Commissioner Chapin on. Let's see here.
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Chen.
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum.
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson.
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved. Thank you. And we'll move to the next item.
Okay, this is the final public meeting item, item 4, LPC 22-00195, application for an amendment in the Borough of Queens, Block 8014, Lot 26, 902 Shore Road in the Douglaston Historic District. This is an arts and crafts colonial revival style house designed by Wilbur S. Knowles and built in 1906. And the application is to amend the approval under Certificate of Appropriateness 1939-773 for constructing additions in a below grade garage and altering fenestration in the existing garage. The applicant will be presenting the proposed changes after we open the proceedings.
Okay, so there are a few of you muted, so just if you can accept the request to unmute. And Commissioner Goldblum, would you make a motion to open the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the applicant may begin.
Mr. Metropolis, if you could unmute yourself and then click on the screen, you'll have control of the slides.
Good morning, Commissioners. Philip Metropolis, the design architect for 902 Shore Road. I wanted to start the presentation with the images of the building as it was approved in December of 2019. The approval included the restoration of the house. Oops, did I change that or did somebody else change that? Anyway, the approval of restoration of the majority of the house, plus an addition at the rear. Today, we are coming before you for an amendment to change one window size, one window location, and to upgrade a gazebo skylight, which is seemingly, after field investigations, not really capable of being restored. It's a full glass gazebo, octagonal gazebo. The first change, it faces this primary facade of Shore Road facing the Long Island Sound or Little Neck Bay, and it's a small window under a first floor porch that housed a powder room at one point originally. That's what we believe the plan shows. And so the applicant would like to equalize that window to be the same size as the rest of the windows opening onto the porch, which was currently enclosed and will be opened and screened in completely. As you can see in the images, the casing is all still quite intact from the original house. It is dramatically covered with many, many layers of paint. Restoration or replacement will be challenging, but the new window would be match the size that's the window on the right. So that's the first changes of the historic context we're looking at. And then in the next image, there you see the two windows. That's the small window on the right is the window we're looking to make larger. The upper left corner would be held, and then the window would expand to the right and down to match the window to its right. And again, the casing would also be replicated and matched to all the other casings on the building, which is mostly a two-part casing with a decorative outside edge. And then on the next image, we'll see the other, so this is a corner lot. So at Knollwood Avenue, the other primary facade is here. You see the gazebo image. On the left is what was approved with the opening porch and some modifications to the windows. And there are leaded windows in this particular building, which will all be restored and maintained. The leaded windows will be placed into a new sash. All the sections will be salvaged. Their gazebo has a glazed connection corridor with the leaded windows and a glazed roof that will be replaced. The structure is cast iron with a sort of a T-shaped pier column, eight T-shaped columns sitting on top of a concrete base with a cast iron spandrel and then cast iron beams that then have wood purlins on top. And the spandrels are all completely rotted. The building currently has a plastic, non-historic glazed roof on it with some sort of strange taping system that tried to seal the joints. One of the problems is, besides the fact that the cast iron structure is completely rusted and wearing out, the building is on the water, and the structure wouldn't also meet the wind loads designed for today's construction. So we looked at a replacement skylight where the skylight sections were matching the number of panels. It's a 6 sections per side. The skylight the new skylight proposed has a 6 sections per side. The clear story and the glazed roof as well, glazed peak, were all replicated to match. The next image, you'll see some of the existing conditions of the gazebo and what shape it's in. Here's the proposed, as you can see in this image, this is our proposed replacement skylight, which is an aluminum glass, an insulated glass that would obviously also meet energy and wind load requirements. The existing leaded windows are a simple 5-quarter stock window section where the glazed panel is pushed all the way out to the flush face of the wood frame, and so the replication would match that where the leaded windows would be attached to the surface of a new sash section. On the next, let's see, we're getting there. Here we go. Here's the existing conditions, some of the existing conditions of the exterior. The upper right corner shows a construction photo, whereas ultimately majority of the exterior existing facade will be restored, and then the addition will be on the rear corner of the property. And then the next image shows interiors, and here's where you can see some of how the existing gazebo is put together, with the rusted spandrel shown on that upper left corner. I did not include an image of the rusted columns, but the building has had water damage if we continue, so some of the other images, the building hasn't changed condition much since the district was designated in 1996. The current owner is a new owner, and he's been working to make these renovations, and so hopefully after he's done, everything will be back to its really quite glorious condition. The biggest change between obviously the gazebo skylights is the loss of the curvature, which is a very costly, time-consuming, and difficult thing to achieve on this particular type of structure. That's the gazebo piece, and then there was one other piece. As you can see, the gazebo elevations are approved on the left, the proposed on the right. Whereas we tried to, the skylight designer did his best at replicating the proportions and sizes of the existing. And then the last item that we're looking to propose, requesting an amendment on, is on the facade facing the driveway, the second floor window. We're looking to shift that window a little bit further to the west. That would be to the right, in order to balance the corner of the second floor. And I don't really have a view that shows that 3-quarter view, but this window in particular, the only request here is to shift this window. And I think if we go to the next image, you'll see what we're proposing. It's about a 1.5 foot shift to the right. So, and those are the 3 issues that we're requesting for amendment at this here at this meeting. And then here are the historic photos from 1940, the tax photo, an undated photo. Yes, the building had a dark shingle on it. We found evidence of a green shingle on some of the exposed shingle areas. And then here are the images from when we presented in 2018 or 2019. And then these are the designation photographs from 1994 when the district was designated. So.
Okay, thank you. And the window that you're shifting can be seen in the bottom left photo of this.
That's correct. That
right?
would be this one window here, bottom left on that one side facade. We're shifting that a few feet. And then also in that bottom left window, you see the small window, which we're proposing to make into a larger window.
Okay. All right. Yes, we have another question. Commissioner Chapin. Just accept my request to unmute.
The gazebo wasn't, I don't know if this was discussed because my internet's been going in and out, though right now it seems to be fine. I think things have, Lisa's suggestion has worked. Anyway, I wanted to ask about the shape of the gazebo. It seems that the replacement, from looking at it, isn't as curved as the original. Could the applicant comment on that difference and whether the original sort of shape could be a little better preserved?
Yes, we looked at that. The costs, honestly, the costs were astronomical at trying to maintain. First of all, this structure really can't be maintained because of its deterioration. And the way it's really just a cast iron frame and some wood purlins. And it's just the glazing system is just clipped onto the wood purlin. So we don't find it as a structurally sound system to proceed with. And those cast iron, and then the fabrication of attempting to recreate the curvature is incredibly difficult and costly and time consuming. So we tried our best to come up with an appropriate scale and size and height that replicated it as best we could.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, then we may be ready for our discussion. So for those of you who are muted, I'm sending requests to unmute all of you so we can begin that discussion. So this has been presented is a colonial revival style house for which we approved additions in the past. And this is an application to amend that prior approval for these three discrete changes. One is to modify the small window opening on the front facade to match the window adjacent to it, which can be seen in the bottom left photo here. The other is to shift the second floor window on that side facade slightly forward. And the third is to replace this greenhouse conservatory addition. So we'll begin our discussion on these three components. Commissioner Devonshire, would you start this one?
Thanks, Sarah. Just when I popped a fig in my mouth.
Sorry.
Well, I'm okay with the modification of the window. However, with regard to the gazebo, it's actually, I can tell it's a Lord and Burnham greenhouse. And when in my other life, when I was a restoration carpenter, I restored a Lord and Burnham greenhouse very similar to this at Old Westbury Gardens in their garden area. It is absolutely not difficult. It requires that it be disassembled so that you can abrasively blast the cast iron frame, which can be done. At that time, you could add supplemental iron to the frame in order to add strength to it if necessary. It's very easy to acquire the wood that's necessary to make the muntins for these things. And there are several companies that can provide not only single pane curved glass, but double pane curved glass. And so I can approve the window change. I do not approve the change in shape of the gazebo.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Goldblum?
I'm so glad that Michael said that. I was hoping he would say something like that, so I'm with him.
Okay, Commissioner Chapin?
Yeah, I was waiting for those who've had direct experience with this kind of thing to weigh in because, you know, I think all the changes proposed generally are fine, but I was concerned about the historic appearance of this lovely little building. And I mean, Michael didn't address the expense factor, which of course we're not supposed to consider. However, he did indicate that this is something that can really be done, and I would like the applicant to look into, you know, finding a different way to deal with the greenhouse so that it is more closely resembling the original. The other changes I think are fine. I don't have any problem with them.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Shamir Barron?
Yes, I'm in agreement with Michael Devonshire.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson?
Yeah, I'm in agreement as well. That curvature is a significant architectural feature. It was implied that this design of that gazebo might not be, structurally sound. I just note that it's been there for 115 years. That seems to me to be pretty sound. But I'm okay with the two window changes, but not the loss of that curvature in the gazebo.
Okay, Commissioner Lutfi?
I'm in agreement with everything that's been said.
Commissioner Bland?
As am I.
And Commissioner Chen?
Sounds like there's a consensus.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll make a motion to approve the two window changes and we'll take no action on the gazebo and the applicant can explore restoration and or other ways to address the historic configuration of it. And that may result in a staff approval in the end. So we'll have the applicant continue to work on that. So Commissioner Devonshire, would you make a motion to approve the two window changes?
In the matter of 902 Shore Road in the Douglaston Historic District, an application to amend approval under significant appropriateness 19-39773 for constructing additions and a below-grade garage and altering the fenestration and the existing garage. I recommend.
That was from the earlier approval.
Oh, I'm sorry. Geez. I apologize.
That's correct. That's correct. That's the correct description.
Oh, okay. I recommend approval with some modifications, finding that enlarging the existing window on the front facade below the covered porch will make it consistent in size and configuration with the existing first floor windows. But the new roof proposed on the existing historic gazebo will be similar in materials and finish and details.
Actually, we'll strike that one because we're not going to take an action on the gazebo.
Right, while relocating the existing second floor window on the north facade will disrupt the symmetrical composition of the first floor bay window and the two windows above it. It will be consistent with the less ordered fenestration at the secondary facades. Proposed changes will not detract from the special historic architectural character of the building or the Douglaston Historic District. However,
oh no, we're gonna not take an action on this part of it.
Oh, okay.
We're gonna let them explore restoration, which
Oh, okay.
ultimately can be done at staff level. Okay, so we're just approving the two windows. So Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion? Let's see. All right, let's.
Is he there?
All right, let's have.
Second.
Thank you.
Sorry.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Yes. Chair Carroll.
Aye.
Commissioner Bland.
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 9 in favor and none opposed, the motion passes.
Okay, so that is approved in part for the two changes to the two window openings. And the applicant has heard our comments on the gazebo and will explore the options working with the staff. Thank you.
Okay, and we'll now move to the Preservation Department's public hearing agenda, starting with item number 1, LPC 22-00050, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, Block 261, lots 111, 9, and 110, 295 to 297 Hicks Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. It's currently 3 vacant lots, and the application is to construct 2 new buildings.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the hearing. You now have control of the presentation. Just click on your screen, and then you can use your arrow keys to move it back and forth. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin.
Hi, this is Brendan Coburn. I will be making the presentation, and Andrew Acevedo will be controlling the machine. So Andrew, can we start on the first page? This project was previously approved by the commission as 3 small townhouses at about 16 foot 10 inches apiece. It is that developer sold the land to the new owner, who is proposing to build 2 houses on this lot, a 27.5 foot house and a 22.5 foot house. The new owner plans to live in the larger house for himself and sell the smaller house. The photographs, the 2 black and white photographs from the 40s, show the the most recent occupants of the lot, which was a rectory building and a small church hall. The property was owned by the Catholic Church. We had included some Sanborn maps showing the previous split of 2 lots. Unfortunately, we were unable to get them uploaded in time to this presentation. But as you can see from these photographs, it was in fact once upon a time 2 lots. It had become 3 lots for this previously approved project. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this is a typical 16 foot 10 row house that was approved on the lot. Next slide, please. Next. This is the front facade of the previously approved 3 townhouses, and that's the front. Next slide, please. This was the previously approved rear facade. And now can we move to the next slide? So this is the context for our project. This is on Hicks Street in the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. The dotted lines are showing the lot. We have divided the lot into, as I said, 2 lots. One is 27.5 feet. The other is 22.5 feet. This is sort of a funny block in Brooklyn Heights. It's really a rather eclectic lot. You see that there to the south of our project are a row of 4 and 5 story sort of townhouses, some with stoops, some without. To the immediate north of our site are a pair of 2-story carriage houses, then some more 4-story carriage houses, a 3-story building, and then a 5-story building, and then back to a 5-story apartment building, and then back to sort of 3- and 4-story townhouses. On the opposite side of the street, we have a mix of 4- and 3-story townhouses on the southern portion of the lot and on the block, and on the northern portion, we have a mix of 2- and 3-story carriage houses and then a firehouse as well. Could we have the next slide, please? So I'm comparing and contrasting the previously approved subdivision into 3 lots with our new proposed subdivision into the 2 larger lots. And you can see that our buildings, we've actually maintained pretty much the same volume as the previously approved scheme in terms of setbacks and where it goes on the lot. Next slide, please. This is just, again, a detail on the left of the 3 previously approved townhouses. And then the drawing on the right is showing our proposed two buildings. And you can see one of them, the larger one is on the left in purple, the smaller one is on the right. Our scheme includes a garage, which is both something that you see in the form of carriage houses and the firehouse on this block. It is allowed by zoning due to the size of the lot. So we have put a garage into this project that is on the front facade. So if we can move to the next. Oh, actually, before you, can you go back one more? I just want to point out that on the sort of orangey colored speculative building, we have created a front yard that aligns with the adjacent front yards to the south of the project. And then on the purple building to the north is smooth, and it's acting in the same way as the carriage houses to the north of the project. If we could go to the next slide. Actually, Andrew, can you take us to the color version of this? Okay, so this is our proposed design. I'm sorry, we had resequenced these drawings, and that presentation didn't get uploaded. So, and we'll go back through the renderings and talk about some of the precedent for this. So we are showing here these two townhouses that are designed as to both read as a single composition, which is not unusual strategy for some of these row house neighborhoods. And what we're trying to do is, because the building is larger than some of the other buildings, we're making a sort of grander gesture at the ground floor, which is the arch that is containing the garage. And then the two doors entering the two projects are oversized doors, but are secondary to the arch, the arched opening for the garage. The larger building has 4 windows across the facade, and the smaller building has 3 windows across the facade. They are separated by a control joint that runs vertically from the top of the building down to just close by the arch. And the window widths are aligning with are sort of the scale or width of the carriage houses to the left, but are more on the size of the grander townhouses to the right. The primary facade is 3 stories tall, and then there is a setback of 10 feet, which is what you're seeing up above. Our facade is brick, and the lower level is a sort of smooth common bond brick facade that has a soldier course just above the arch, and then a datum line of a bluestone sill that it steps up to. And then above that, we have this regular cadence of windows, and they are separated by a sort of recessed Flemish bond decorative brick. So we are, in this case, trying to do a modern interpretation of some of the decorative brickwork we see on this block. You can see it in the cornice of the adjacent carriage houses. You will see it in some other slides of the tubby row houses up the block. The cornice of our building repeats the soldier course and then sort of corbels out slightly to a bluestone cap. There is the 10-foot setback on that 4th floor, and then there is a terracotta sort of modified modern version of a mansard roof. So we're sort of playing with the language of the mansard roof that is common to these row house districts. They were commonly sort of additions to those buildings that had been built without mansards previously. So we're sort of turning this a little bit on the head. This is being driven by the zoning, which requires that we have a setback at between 35 and 45 feet. So that is the reason the mansard is not something that's part of the building's primary facade. We also were just trying to break down the scale of the building to a certain degree and have the facade step from the 5-story building to the south, to our 3-story building to the 2-story building. So we just, the compositional strategies we employed were all about making clear that we're doing a new building, but that we're fitting in and playing nicely with the neighbors. If we could go back to the black and white drawing, actually, sorry, no, let's hold on that axonometric because it explains it well. This is just a massing study showing the setback of that mansard roof area. And then we have solar panels and bulkhead on the roof for the townhouse on the right. The other house has the staircase to the roof concealed behind the parapet. You can also see in this bubble in the upper right-hand corner that the ironwork of the more townhousey of the two is aligning with the ironwork that is to the south of the property. If we could just go back now to the, let's go to the black and whites at the beginning of the presentation, close to the beginning. Okay, so this, I apologize for this drawing. This is, I assume that this is as confused looking on everybody else's screen as it is on mine. But this is, I just want to quickly review the two materials for this project. The house is the 3-story portion of the building is this brick, this Pennsylvania molded modular brick in red with a red mortar, and then the clay terracotta on the roof is a sort of more modern looking version of a terracotta shingle. It's made by Peterson out of Denmark. The windows are aluminum clad black tilt and turn windows. The garage door will be painted black. We did modify this design slightly and add a transom unit to the parlor floor. I mean, the main floor windows, the second floor windows, sorry, that didn't make it into this presentation for technical reasons. And I'm going to show you the back facade now. Next. This is the rear facade of the building. So we're using the same, similar strategy to the rear of the building that we're using the front. So we have the same primarily 3-story brick window. We've introduced 2 bay windows into the two projects, a 2-story bay window on the right and a 1-story bay window on the left. And those are similarly clad in this dark gray clay terracotta, and then that mansard up above is also that same material. So we're just sort of keeping it to these two materials with the black painted windows and spandrels above the windows. On the upper right-hand side of the larger townhouse, you can see we have a little bit of the staircase, which is sneaking up from the 4th floor up to the roof terrace out of view. We were able to sort of keep that thing within the building, and then it just pops up outside. If we could, Andrew, if we could go to some of the contextual photographs of the neighborhood. Actually, this is a great photograph here. So our site is in the upper drawing is the empty lot next to the 2 row houses. The photograph down below is showing its alignment with the houses across the street. You can see in this composite photo above the sort of sawtooth, no, go back, please. There, that's good. We have that 5-story apartment building on the northern part of the block, and then these 4- and 5-story townhouses on the southern part of the block. Across the street from us, you'll see that we have the set of 2- and 3-story carriage houses where the arches are in the middle, and then we have these sort of 2 funny ones that are read as a single composition that is symmetrical about the center line of the 2 buildings, but each building is itself asymmetrical. The firehouse, the sort of neoclassical structure, is rigorously symmetrical, and of course has the biggest garage door of all. And then the 6 tubby row houses on the corner are again a single composition, but where each building also has reads as its own individual thing. The tubby townhouses, I would also note, have this interesting black or dark gray and then reddish terracotta or slate we're not quite sure whether it's terracotta or slate.
Quick question for you.
Yeah.
How does your arch compare in width to the carriage house arches that we see on the block across the street or next door?
It's wider for sure.
By
Andrew,
double?
do you have that? No. I would say
they're probably like 8 feet, 7
I think
feet.
they're like 9. I'd say it's maybe 50% wider.
So yours is maybe like 14 feet.
Yeah, Andrew, can you just check the dimension? I'm of course staring at a set of drawings that are not to scale.
Maybe as we're checking the dimension, as you can move forward and are speaking to the context, you can maybe address it sort of from a proportional standpoint of the street, and then we'll get through the presentation and then take more questions.
Okay. Okay, so then can we go to the photo? So these are this is now that same composition with the previously approved 3 townhouses on the upper, and then our proposed 2 row houses on the lower. And so I think this shows the difference in the width of the arches on the 2 buildings. And I think that what we decided to do was we are working with a bigger facade, a bigger composition. So we made a larger arch as a sort of proportional compositional tool. In this case, we allowed this thing to read as the primary gesture on the facade. Next. So this is just a quick guide to a bunch of photographs that I'm now going to show you of some of the things we've been looking at and thinking about in terms of inspiration in the immediate neighborhood. Our site is the little yellow thing, and then all the red things are the photographs you're about to see. If you could go to the next. So upper left-hand corner is the 2 row houses immediately adjacent. The middle photograph on the above is directly across the street, where you see this funny combination of a 3-story carriage house with a large central arch door, elliptical in this case, and then the firehouse is in the upper right corner, and then the lower right-hand corner is a townhouse and carriage house on Willow Place, a block away, where in this case the carriage house door has been located off to one side, and the door to the house is central and prominent. And then we have the MERS townhouses also on Willow Place, right around the neighborhood, which are of course these incredible modern buildings that play nicely with the neighbors, but are so clearly different. And I think the middle image on the lower one is a single large townhouse with 2 garages. So we're reading this larger composition, and then the photograph on the left is a smaller individual piece, and then the federal townhouse between that and the corner building. So next slide, please. These are again more examples of the different treatments of brickwork on the arched doors. The 4 brick arches are all on the block where we're doing our project. You can see in one case it's been clad in a limestone, in another case it's been left as a raw brick. We have these elliptical arches on one side, and then across the street we also have full half arches with the brick, sort of two soldiers running around in the perimeter there. Next. And then these are some of the other sort of approaches to decorative brickwork that we're interested in. In particular, if you look at the top left and the top right photograph, these are the worker house projects that are on Girolamo and Columbia Place, and the sort of our inspiration for the brick maker thing, and it's our interest introducing some detail and something that will play with light on the facade, and sort of, you know, break up the masonry a little bit. Can we go to the next? All right, so this is now, I'm going to show you a series of renderings of the proposed project. So this is the existing context with the empty lot, and the next. And this is our building inserted into that empty lot. And this particular view we are showing in particular because it explains our setback at the 4th floor and this mansard roof detail. And the chimney you're seeing there is the chimney from the adjacent carriage house that we have to now extend up as a result of our construction. Next, please. And this is a view approaching the building coming from the south, heading north. So this is sort of the what I would describe as a typical vehicular view of the project, mostly because I drive up this all the time. So this is my most common view, but this is sort of looking at it as it compares with the 2 carriage houses on the left. And I think that, you know, this is where you really see that we have increased the scale of our building. We are bigger than the 2 carriage houses, so we're making a bigger gesture with the arch. Next slide, please. And this is a head-on view, which I think is sort of probably the best view to look at and study the facade composition. And so we are, you know, we're trying to make this lower plinth level of the house read as sort of a continuous thing with the control joint in the masonry sort of breaking up that continuous thing. So you both read it as continuous, but you read that there is a separation between these 2 buildings. And then we have the smooth brick on the plinth course, and that it comes up to a small, slightly pushed out frieze that then corbels up to a bluestone datum that becomes the windowsill of that 2nd floor. We have the decorative brick on the 2 facades of those 2 buildings, and then that goes up, and the sort of soldier course of brick again pops out. That sort of frieze course pops out a little bit, and then corbels up to a bluestone cap, and then you can see the mansard roof is set back there. And this is sort of the coming from the south. It's not visible from this side. I don't think it's that visible, but you'll the view looking from north to the south is where you see it most clearly. Can we just pop to the sections for a second, Andrew? Okay, so this is, I just to show you the section through the building, this is showing the 10-foot setback for the 4th floor of the house. And so you can see the landmarks person on the opposite side of the street is going to, without question, view some bits and pieces of the rooftop stuff. We raised the parapet. We've made the parapet part of the mansard in this case because there's quite a bit of stuff on this roof. And I think actually at this point, Andrew, we could go to that head-on final, just straight on color elevation. Yeah. Oh, go back. Yeah, I think I think this is the board that we'll end on. We made the parapet taller on the mansard section to hide all of the usual stuff that's up there. These clients are planning to have extensive roof gardens up there. And in addition to the usual air conditioning equipment and vents and skylights and this, that, and the other thing, we decided that we would try and conceal all of that stuff by raising the sort of forehead on the mansard to that level. So I think that concludes my presentation. So.
Okay, great. And I don't know if you were able to get the actual dimension for the arch, but maybe Commissioner Goldblum, did you want to follow up on that question?
No, I got the general gist. I
Okay.
can see it more or less.
Okay, other questions? All right, I'm not seeing any other questions at this time, so we'll move to public testimony. And we may have questions after that. So if you're in the meeting and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you. There's a raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. And we will start with anyone who signed up in advance and then get to anyone else who has their hand raised. And I will turn it over to Anthony Fabre, our Director of Intergovernmental and Community Affairs, to take us through the testimony.
Thank you. We do have some signups for this item. The first person that I'll bring in is Historic Districts Council, Diego Robayo. Diego, you should be in the meeting.
Good morning. My name is Diego Robayo and I work for the Historic Districts Council. In the interest of transparency, Brendan Coburn, the architect of record for this project, serves on HDC's board of directors. Mr. Coburn has recused himself from the deliberations for this project. This building was previously approved by LPC as 3 small townhouses. This new application is for 2 buildings. The committee felt that the massing, materiality, and detailing of the application were well done. Nevertheless, we have 2 primary concerns related to the design of the building's facade. First, the committee felt that the arched opening on the ground level of the larger building was too wide, creating a misalignment with the fenestration above. We recommend raising the spring line of the arch, which would allow for a narrower opening. We feel this would improve the overall appearance of the arch and would create a more harmonious relationship with the remainder of the facade. Second, we felt that the building's lack of windows mountings gave the fenestration an institutional quality, especially in relation to the neighboring buildings. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The next person that I'll bring in is George Calderaro. George, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute your microphone.
Good morning, Commissioners. George Calderaro, Chair of the Preservation Committee of the Victorian Society, New York. The Victorian Society can support many aspects of this proposal to build 2 new buildings on these vacant lots. This is a block with a very lively mix of carriage houses, row houses, and small apartment buildings, and several different lot widths. The construction will restore the street wall. The majority of the street facades are brick in a variety of colors, and there are existing curb cuts at the carriage houses. However, we feel there is one major problem which affects both of these buildings, as well as a few minor decisions which could be improved upon. The major problem, as has been noted, is the massive scale of the semicircular arch which provides access to the garage space. This is an arch which has more in common with those found at the entrance of the Eagle Warehouse down on Fulton Street or the Archive building in Manhattan than with any arched opening on this street. In addition, the shape of the arch makes it appear that the garage door opening is actually shorter than the ground floor doors and windows in these 2 houses. It looks like it's sinking into the ground. A segmental arch supported on piers similar to those of the adjacent garage houses would appear less massive. The prominence of the arch and the details of the 2 ground floor facades also diminishes the narrower of these 2 houses. This narrow house, quote, narrow house, is 22 feet wide, but the adjacent archway is so dominant and the other details on the narrow house are so recessive that it appears that the entrance on the right side could be the service entrance for a massive mansion. And compared to the detail of the brick, the details of the garage door and infill panels seems overly plain. Finally, the rooftop pergola is too close to the facade and will be partially visible from the street, which seems unnecessarily aggressive in a pair of houses which have backyards and terraces at several levels. We urge the applicant to modify the arch at the garage entrance and to consider the use of a segmental arch in this location, to reconsider the details at the ground floor of the narrow house to help establish its individual character, to reconsider the details of the garage door infill, and to set the pergola back to a point where it will not be visible. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's it for the signups that we have, but we do have someone who's raised their hand. So I will bring in Judy Stanton. Judy, you should be in the meeting. You just have to unmute your microphone, turn on your camera if you wish to, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Okay, I hope you can hear me now. I just unmuted myself.
Yes, we can hear you.
Good, okay. Judy Stanton from the Brooklyn Heights Association. The Brooklyn Heights Association Landmarks Committee has reviewed the proposal for 295, 297 Hicks Street and the impact it will have on the Brooklyn Heights Historic District. We are not yet ready to support this application. These houses are the type of historic district new construction that we think has the potential for excellence. And we appreciate the care and thinking that the team has shown when sharing earlier iterations with our committee. With that said, we feel that it is still a work in progress. In particular, the large Romanesque arch is a challenging element. If the applicant feels that it is important for the arch to remain in the design, here are some of our thoughts on what we think would make it work more cohesively. The arch size strikes us as more akin to those on a commercial building or maybe a large freestanding house, but not the type of house seen on a row house and certainly not on this block. Sorry, but not the type seen on a row house and certainly not on this block. That commercial feeling is reinforced by the window size on the second story and the single panes. We think divided light windows would work better, perhaps tilt and turned or simulated double hung. Another purpose with the arch size is the tendency to make the project look like one large house, but we are unclear if that is the goal. We admire the way the houses in the William Tubby row on this block or the similar William Halsey Wood row on Willow Street form cohesive units, yet with very distinct individual identities. We think that idea could be pursued here with some refinements, like using the recessed Flemish bond style on only one house, using a different brick type on each house, or differentiating the houses at the upper floors, or just the setbacks. The arch's monumentality seems at odds with the plain doors. The carriage houses on this street were built as utilitarian buildings, while these are intended to be substantial residences, so echoing a carriage house base seems off. Thank you. That concludes my testimony.
Thank you. We do not have any other hands raised for this item.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to also note that Brooklyn Community Board 2 recommended approval of the application as presented. Okay, Brendan, would you like to respond to the comments we've heard?
Sure. Let's see. Could we actually go to the view looking from north to south? The rendering. I think.
Could you provide me with a page number, please?
Oh, A09.
Yeah, I don't have control.
Yeah, it's yeah. What? Oh. It was the view looking down the block.
A24.
There we go. Thank you. Yeah, I think, I mean, I appreciate everything that everybody has said about the size of the arch, and but I think that this is mean, the trick here is that this is a new building. This is a modern structure with a modern functionality to it, which is, you know, a large house and a smaller house, which is still a large house, that are being built at the same time. And then there's an opportunity to have a sort of larger composition that is then understandable as two separate houses. I think that the scheme that we've come up with seeks to do that. And I think that the monumentality of the arch, you know, while it is certainly inspired by the arches of things like the Eagle Warehouse, and then some of the other commercial sized buildings in the neighborhood, it is, you know, it is located off center rather than being centered. So it is in my mind, it's a sort of compositional play with a kit of parts that is familiar to all of us in these sort of row house neighborhoods, and in particular in the north in Brooklyn Heights. So I think that you know, that I remain comfortable with the size of this gesture. And by the way, I saw that the very first move out of the gate when we got this project was to do a segmented or elliptical arch, and it felt dinky, to be honest, on the facade because of the 27.5 the foot module. So that was when we sort of started to experiment with this half arch, and it arrived at a place that I think is that I'm, you know, compositionally and architecturally comfortable with. I think because the block is so eclectic, it can support another eclectic a facade or composition within the block. And I think the reality is that once built, this will be sort of initially invisible. It will fit in with everything else that's going on in the block, but upon further examination, you'll realize, oh, this is a larger building, but then it breaks down into two pieces. So I think I you know, at this point, I'm comfortable with the composition as it is. We did add a transom element to the front facade that for technical reasons we sent in, but I don't think it got loaded. I don't think we're opposed to the idea of adding more muntins to the windows on the first and second floor to sort of break down the scale of those windows. I understand that argument perfectly well. I would do it if it was considered super important, but I also think, okay, this is a modern building, and this is a way of expressing its modernity. And then I would just point out that the pergolas in this case are solar arrays, actually. So they're part of our strategy for getting solar power into these townhouses. I think rotating that pergola that's visible here by 90 degrees and pushing it back is certainly something that we could do. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any final questions? All right, not seeing any questions, so I'm moving to request to unmute all of you so we can close the hearing and begin our discussion. Commissioner Chapin, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
Motion to close the hearing.
And Commissioner Lutfi, would you second that motion?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the hearing is closed, and we'll begin our discussion on this proposal for two new buildings that read compositionally as one with a setback top floor sort of articulated to look like a mansard. And we've heard discussion about the arch and the single pane windows and the materiality. So we can focus on all of these aspects in our comments. Commissioner Goldblum, would you start this one?
Okay, thanks. This is an interesting application. It's interesting to me because it's relatively different from the stuff we've seen from CWB in the past. It's frankly engaging in a very creative way with both the context and the reality of this is a new building, and it's a new building with a particularly idiosyncratic scale. interesting. The thing it reminded me first of was that a collection of 3 townhouses on 70th Street between West End and Broadway on the north side of the street, which is a composition of 3 townhouses centering on a large arch that is meant to look both like a single house and 3 townhouses. And I mean, I'm sure there are other examples of that, like I think like on the Upper East Side where they have the carriage houses there. I'm sure, and here we have, I'm sure there are other ones that I don't know about in Brooklyn, but I think it's an interesting compositional game. And I think generally it works. I think this is generally an appropriate proposal. I think that the applicant can work with staff on a few things that would make it appropriate, in my view. I actually think that the arch is properly scaled, even though it's bigger than the ones on the street. I think it's acceptable. I think the applicant should look with staff at 2 things related to the arch, however. One is the design of the garage door itself. Because the arch is so darn big, that garage door is very, very prominent in terms of, the fuzzy guy and his dog who are walking by in this rendering. They will be looking straight at that garage door. So I would just ask that the applicant to look. I don't think it needs to be a traditional, neo-traditional paneled extravaganza with straps and all that stuff. But I think it needs to be something that is designed and that has an appearance that is meant to be not like a garage door from Levittown. And I also think that the placement of the window should be considered. If you look at the other views, the placement of the window, because it's of a different reflectivity, in a funny way undercuts the arch and makes the arch feel less volumetric to me and less kind of solid. So I would just say they should just look at that with staff. The other thing that I would suggest is the rhythm of the windows. Part of the game that you're playing is 2 versus 1, right? Is it one big thing? What's the composition? Is it one or 2? And one thing that I think that for me feels peculiar to the neighborhood is the fact that the rhythm kind of seems to bleed across both facades. And I would suggest that you look with staff at tightening the spacing so that they are more, so that the facades tip a little bit more to the 2 separate buildings as opposed to the one building that washes across on the top. I think that's, to my understanding, more typical in situations like this, like kind of when you're looking at a squint at the block, it's that window configuration, the solid void, that kind of makes the rhythm, and there's usually a little bit of a break between buildings. The last thing I would suggest is at the top. I think that the idea of rotating the pergola and setting it back is good. And I think you might look at tilting that facade a little bit more. I think it's almost vertical and kind of looks like a wall and doesn't really look too much like a mansard to me. Oh, lastly, the brick color, look in the field with staff at that. It looks a little bit too close to the one next door. I would just suggest that they look at that with staff with a real brick.
Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
I agree with some of what Michael said, mostly about the mansard. I don't have any problem with the garage door. I do believe the window within the arch, however, is kind of I would like to see transoms on the second floor windows. I feel like the rendering is probably what's causing the problem with the brick color. But that's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with some of the comments about the window. I think the design approach here, and not that I want to play designer here, is either whether it's more of a the building spilling over to the adjoining facade or make it distinctive. And so that is a fundamental design choice that But if historically it is more appropriate to be done that way, and there's a majority of commissioners that feel that way, then that is a way to. But I do agree with the comment about the windows, that depending on which way the treatment, the facade treatment is the facade philosophy. I think that the window proportion and whether you want to add a transom or and by the way, in terms of that the arch on the bottom, if indeed you are going to make it into two distinct buildings to read and to blend in with the neighborhood, then the proportion for the arch maybe need to be recentered a little bit, because then the gap is too much to the one side. So those are some of my comments.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Bland?
Yeah, I want to also compliment Brendan here in bringing us a very fresh approach to a scheme that I think was quite unexpected, really. Starting just with the larger building and a smaller building, et cetera. I keep looking and hearing and thinking about all the various tweaks, more or less tweaks, I guess, that have been suggested. And, I think this building is in the hands of a very good architect who has thought through rigorously what he's doing here. He, unlike what we heard in the other vacant lot, one of the very few vacant lots in Brooklyn Heights, where the architect kind of picked a kit of parts and then threw them together. This is a composed idea, and it's a cohesive idea. So I'm a little reluctant to start pointing out little things to change. The arch, of course, everybody's focusing on the arch. The more I look and think about the arch, the more I like it as it is. The door, particularly to the large house, seems very small, but I'm not sure that I would suggest that it needed to be changed. It's the same scale, I think, as the door on the small house. The idea of more articulation in the windows. Yes, I understand that, but I'm not sure that a contemporary building, and this is clearly a contemporary building, needs that. The visibility of the so-called mansard, by the way, if it were a little more mansardy, as somebody has suggested, I think that would help it, but the visibility of it is acceptable to me. The trellises, I think, are not in each case. One is shown here, the other is very visible in another view. I think those should be pushed back and not fight so much with everything else that's going on in these really very large houses. So I guess I'm coming away with backing off of much except those trellises, and kind of excited that this is such a refreshing and different approach to this long vacant lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lutfi.
I think I'm going to differ a little bit from what we've heard among the commissioners and refer a little more closely to some of the testimony we've heard from the public. I do think that there are many things about this design that are wonderful and refreshing, and that enable it to fit comfortably within the landscape around it. That said, these are two buildings, and while I think it's nice for them to relate to each other, I feel that as currently designed, it really reads as one big building. And my sense is that since it's been designed by one hand, and it's not unusual for buildings to relate to each other, but still read as separate. I think something should be done here to keep them from a design standpoint connected, but separate them a little more so that they read separately. So that could be one of a few things. There could be a color change between the two buildings. There could be, you know, as we've heard, a change in the brick on the upper part of the smaller building, so that it doesn't connect as much, but it doesn't connect as one, but still relates to each other. And then that may, as one commissioner mentioned, kind of impact what happens with the arch at the bottom. And so I personally think that would be an important move. I don't know why it needs to read as one building if it's two buildings. And I also think that it would be nice to have some articulation in the glass here. On the block, there seems that would still retain the sense of modernity. This building is modern, but makes reference to, you know, some of the history and the architecture around it. So why not do that and break up these glass masses? So at a minimum, I think it should be 1/1, which is 1/1s, which is what predominates on the block. There are some 2/2s, and then there are some multi-lights over 1. But I think 1/1s would be fine. And then finally, I agree about the trellises, that they have to be shifted in some way so that they're not visible or much less visible.
Okay, thanks. Commissioner Gustafson.
I guess to continue the trend, I guess I guess I agree in part, but I disagree more in part with my fellow commissioners. Let's start with the rooftop and work our way down. As the applicant said, there's quite a bit of stuff going on this roof. And I think maybe in the testimony, they noted that, you know, you've got an opportunity here with a new building to divide up the stuff you want to do between the rear yard, the interior, and the rooftop. And I think we're at a situation here of, you know, having your cake and eating it too, or maybe more cake and more cake and more cake. So, you know, when I look, this is the slide I would have asked you to put up on the screen. Of course, that the trellis and the solar panels have to disappear from view. They just have to. If they don't, maybe we need to start thinking harder about ways to create that invisibility to get the benefit of the solar panels at the same time that we at least make an effort to comply with what standards we would otherwise apply, the way we've done things with accessibility applications. So let's go to the arch. Well, let's stay up on the roof. Stay on the roof. This alleged mansard. First of all, it doesn't make sense in the context of this block, from what we've seen. But second of all, I do agree. If anything, it's too vertical. But if you look at it from the point of view of if these two buildings were here and someone had wanted to put that on top of the roof as an extension, I don't think that there's a commissioner here who would approve it, because it doesn't look like a mansard until someone tells you that it is. And maybe because it's set back too far, maybe because it's too vertical, maybe it's because it just doesn't relate to the building below it. But in any event, I don't think that makes much sense at all. And for me, that is inappropriate. As for the archway, as when you go down below that, I think Commissioner Bland is absolutely right. This from that roof line, right down to the street, that's a terrific design. I love it. All right, I think it's wonderful. However, the question of whether it's two buildings or one, and this has come up in past applications, you got to make a commitment to one or the other. From the roof line down to the first, through to the top of the first floor, we clearly have two buildings that are designed the same. Once you get below that line, we start to get muddled. And if you look at the way the arch comes down to the ground on that right side, all right, it actually looks like it would look if somebody had decided to attach some things onto the building. There's like 4 or 5 things meeting and overlapping with one another, which just doesn't, it emphasizes that this really is one as opposed to two. And the solution for that is pretty simple. The arch is, as the testimony said, I think they nailed it, the Victorian Society nailed it. It looks like a factory. And so what I've got here overall is I've got, because of this height and width of that, of that arch, I've got a townhouse on the right, and I've got a warehouse on the left, a little mini warehouse. And the way it's easy to fix, and the applicant can obviously can do that. And I think it has a lot to do with making that arch into one that is relates more in size and scale to the arches that already exist in this neighborhood. So making the arch more contextual in whatever way that is, I'm not going to suggest anything, but whatever way that is, it will automatically pull the right side away from the dividing line between the two structures. And that will give it, then we'll all of a sudden be cohesive. It'll be designed to look like 2 separate buildings all the way from the roof down to the street. So I can't approve it as is because I think there's too many changes that have to go on there. But if you ask me about the windows, I don't really, that to me, it doesn't matter whether there's transoms or muntins. I think it's supposed to look modern, and I think it looks modern the way it is right now. I would fool around with that.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shamir Barron.
Thanks. So glad that we're seeing this project sort of on the heels of the previous new construction in Brooklyn Heights in the area, because what I was struggling with before, while I could not find a reason to consider the Cranberry Street project as inappropriate, I was struggling with what was sort of not quite right or quite compelling about it or quite resolved about it. And this project and this proposal clarifies for me what and allows for me to actually be enthusiastic in my assessment of the appropriateness of this proposal. And it has to do, I think, really with what the way that the applicant responded to testimony in sort of affirming the position around the fact that this is new construction, new building in a historic district, and really pushing us to think about, and himself, what that means. What really is that kit of parts? A bunch of historicist elements like a stoop, a bay window, a cornice-ish. What exactly is a kit of parts, and when do you transcend that kit of parts? When does it kind of become the next thing? And I think that that's what this project achieves, is in yes, of course, identifying and pointing to motifs that we're familiar with, but combining them, really combining, not just mixing them, but like, combining them in a way that takes it to, I think, a level that is almost, unfamiliar. Like, we can't quite identify where things are and where things are from and where they're kind of returning. And I think to see, and then beyond that, to actually work with that kit of parts in a poetic, in a personal, in a kind of like in this moment way. And so I would disagree wholeheartedly with Commissioner Gustafson's proposal that the arch be kind of shifted over. No, the point is that the arch is placed exactly where it's placed and trespasses that sort of center line, or that line that differentiates the two buildings, and calls attention to it by not resolving that arch all the way down to the ground in the way that Carlo Scarpa might have, in the way that that an architect, as Commissioner Bland said, with a sensibility and with talent and with something to say, does, and is in dialogue with the history of these pieces and parts, and in the act of making something new in that dialogue. And I think that this really succeeds on every level in doing that. And I really want to commend the work. Yes, there are things that I might have liked to see a little bit differently. I'm in agreement with some of the other commissioners who are talking about mansard with a little bit more, tilt, or the not having to see the solar arrays as dramatically. But I actually am not interested in kind of tweaking. I think that overall the approach here is really convincing and well done.
Okay, thank you. All right, Commissioner Chapin.
Okay, I agree that with other commissioners that the trellis should be moved back, that the solar panels should be as less visible as they can be, though I'm highly in support of them. I think that there should be somewhat more separation of the buildings, and I appreciate the architect's sort of approach of trying to create the, shall we say, the illusion of one building, but that's something that I don't think from a historic perspective is something that is necessarily so desirable. So some suggestions have been made about changing the window proportions on the second subsidiary building, or perhaps the brick. That obviously would be up to the architect, but I think some very minor changes could further help to differentiate the two buildings. On the arch, I actually agree with Commissioner Chen and Commissioner Gustafson that if you move the arch slightly to the left so that it aligned with the upper windows, that would help to create the sense that the two buildings are separate without, I think, negatively affecting the whole. That's counter, so that's my opinion. I actually agree with him on that. The suggestions, there might be some further articulation to the arch and the arch windows to make it a little less of the seeming to having become the main focus of the building, I think might be done. And note, when you see other large carriage houses, often there are windows that are sort of very large windows that complement that arch. So that doing something with the arch to slightly, to modify it slightly with some suggestions that some of the other commissioners have made, the composition of it might be more appropriate. I don't have any problem with the large windows. I think it's a modern building, and I don't have a problem with the color or the brick. So those are my comments.
Okay, and Diana, how did you feel about the single pane windows on the upper floors?
Oh, I was saying I don't have a problem with that.
Oh, okay, sorry.
I think that's because it's a modern building. I'm okay with it.
Okay. All right, and then, one thing that we didn't comment on was the excavation. So they are excavating the full lot to the full lot line. And, we typically ask for a minimum of a 5-foot setback on below grade excavation to allow for large plantings. So I don't know if people have thoughts on that, Diana or others. If you want to sort of just raise your hand if you want to weigh in on that.
Could we go back to the picture of the donut?
Go to the section.
Just a moment, we'll try to move to a different slide.
Sarah, I did want to add that I felt that the reconfiguration of the volumes, which is taking place here, actually is more suitable to the block than the original plan. So that having a larger building and a smaller building, but larger volumes than the 4 buildings proposed originally, I think is actually a better solution for this block.
Okay, great, thank you.
Could somebody explain this section? It's very unusual.
Well, actually, I think there's a slide just prior to this that shows both levels all the way to the lot line. So it may be that portion of the sort of basement level is unexcavated, but as you can see underneath that, it's fully excavated.
Yeah, I think we should go back to what we always do, which is to require a 5-foot strip at the edge.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
I'd support that, yes.
Agreed.
okay. So I think, we are largely supportive here. And I think, with some modifications and, understanding that there are a couple of commissioners who really would like to see more of a differentiation between the 2 buildings. I think many of you think that that can be a more subtle adjustment in the form of a tweak. So I think, looking at the spacing of the windows at the upper floors and maybe the spacing as well for the arch, although we've heard both sides about not centering it versus keeping it a little asymmetrical. Making the pergola and solar panels invisible or minimally visible, and looking at the mansard a little bit, maybe sloping it or something to be a little bit more of a reference to a mansard. And I think the majority of us are comfortable with the single pane windows. So while we've heard some comments about that, I think we might be comfortable with a revised proposal that really kind of just addresses this sort of subtly the differentiation between the 2 buildings, minimizes the visibility of the rooftop elements and slopes the mansard more, and then has the 5-foot setback. So I think that why don't we take no action and let the applicant come back with these tweaks. I think we might be able to get to an approval with modifications if you're comfortable with the staff, but I think it would be worthwhile to staff doing this, working on this subtle tweaks, but I think it would be worthwhile to bring it back if you all agree. Okay, so we'll take no action and we'll see you back, Brendan, as quickly as you can. And we'll just, work with the staff on addressing these kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 themes. Okay.
Okie doke.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to public hearing item number 2, LPC 22-01811, an application for a certificate of appropriateness in the Borough of Brooklyn, block 655, lot 31, 749 Fifth Avenue, the Weir Greenhouse, now McGovern Weir Greenhouse, individual landmark. This is a Victorian style commercial greenhouse designed by George Curtis Lepsey and built in 1895. And the application is to remove the remainder of a previously demolished building adjoining the greenhouse and to install portions of fencing and a new entrance courtyard pathway and vestibule associated with new fencing and signage and a new building located off the landmark site. And just to kind of reiterate that before the applicant actually begins the presentation, again, I want to note that the vast majority of this project, this is unusual, but in this case, it actually occurs off of the designated landmark site, including, again, almost all of the new building, most of the fencing and signage that you'll see. There is a small internal connection between the historic greenhouse and the new building at the south lot line, and this is being reviewed at staff level. However, small segments of fencing, and as I mentioned, a courtyard with a pathway and a small entry vestibule to the new building adjacent to the greenhouse will be on the landmark site, and that is what is under review today. So with that, the applicant may begin when ready.
Okay, commissioners, the applicants have entered the meeting. You now have control of the screen. Just click on the presentation. Whoops. Hang on a second. So if you just click on the presentation, then you can advance using your arrow keys. Stephen, are you having issues? Stephen, can you unmute yourself and let us know what's going on?
Sorry, not all the controls are popping up on Zoom, so I'm not able to share in the normal place. Let me just try escaping and going back in.
Hold on.
Here we go.
You don't-
Here we go. I got it.
Hold on a second. Let me try again. Are you ready? I'm going to
Yeah.
share
Sorry
my
about that.
screen with you. And you just have to click on the screen. And then you can advance it with the arrow keys on your keyboard.
Okay,
There you go.
got it. Okay, thanks. Actually, I think Ward is going to start out, or
Yes.
Rich.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Ward Dennis with Higgins Quaysbarth, joined by Richard Moylan, who is the president of Greenwood. And I will ask Richard to just introduce this project very briefly, and then Stephen and I will take you through the details.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Richard Moylan, president of Greenwood Cemetery. Thank you for hearing from us today. In 2011, when we rescued the collapsing Weir greenhouse, I didn't expect that it would take us 10 years to get back before you, but here we are. After encountering many difficulties in making the greenhouse suitable for its repurposed intent, we expect to finally complete it early next year. And to support that landmark structure, we are here today seeking approval to move forward on our Education and Welcome Center. We'll be a hub for the community that lacks cultural institutions. We'll offer art, history, nature to a community starved for culture. The space will contain exhibit and gallery space, classroom space, library space, and meeting space that we can make available to our community. Building will also be home for our Urban Grassland Institute, studying climate change and its effect on grass and other native plants. As you know, Greenwood is 478 acres of outdoor space and we care for 4 New York City landmarks, but we are starving for indoor space. This building will help us meet that need as we transition from a very active cemetery to a less active cemetery and a cultural institution. We look forward to your input. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Stephen, can you go to slide 4, the site map?
Yeah.
Nope, back 1.
How do you go back on this?
Back arrow.
I've only been doing Zoom for 2 years now.
Okay, so I will just introduce the project. I think we all know Greenwood Cemetery. The project site is here at the southwest corner of 25th Street and 5th Avenue. The greenhouse and the cemetery have always been historically associated with each other, but prior to the acquisition in 2011, the greenhouse, the Weir greenhouse, was a completely separate institution. It was at one point one of many greenhouses that serviced the cemetery. Now it is the last one and an individual landmark. And if we could go next slide, Stephen. So this is zooming in a little bit. You can see the relationship of the greenhouse to the main entrance of Greenwood Cemetery on the right, and to the wonderful brownstone arched entryway of the cemetery. As Corey mentioned, most of the project for the new building happens off the landmark site in the 3 lots that are outlined in orange. The landmark site consists of the greenhouse and then that area where the number 31 is to the left, to the west. which is where there was previously a one-story wood frame building, and that will become the entry courtyard for the new building. And if we can go to the next slide, please. So this is a detailed view. The red boundary obviously is the landmark site. As Corey mentioned, there are 4 specific items that were before you for today. That is the landscaping of the entry courtyard with the sort of meandering path, which serves a functional purpose, but also serves as a reference back to the picturesque landscape in the cemetery itself. The entrance vestibule that you see at the bottom of the landmark site where Stephen is circling, which does extend onto the landmark property. There is that outline of an existing raised basement, which I'll show in a little bit more detail in a moment, that we are proposing to remove. And then we are installing new fencing around the street perimeter of the greenhouse. Most of that is actually off the landmark site, but the fencing does return onto the landmark site. And even though the new construction and even some of the fencing is pulled back and substantially off the landmark site, we have always approached this project as if it were all landmark. And we believe that the new building is fully appropriate in that context in terms of the scale, massing, materials, compatibility of design, and the connections to the greenhouse itself, which are very limited. And what is particularly notable about this project is that the entire glass and metal construction of the greenhouse, which is in the process of being restored, will be untouched. And the only connections are through the brick masonry wall that Corey mentioned before. And really the design approach here is to celebrate and center the greenhouse itself as the primary feature in the entire composition of the project. So next, please. Some historic images of the greenhouse itself. The greenhouse was constructed in 1895 and designed by C. Curtis Gillespie for the Weir family. Later became the McGovern Weir greenhouse. You can see in these photos that there historically have been buildings to the left, the south, and to the right, the west. The 2-story building that you see to the right was later lowered to a 1-story building, and that was recently demolished under prior permits from the commission. You will also see on this slide, and if you can go to the next, Stephen, that the fencing around the site has changed considerably over time. By 1973, there was a plain picket fence, and by 2013, those are really just a roll down gates that serve as a fence. So we do not have historic fencing, but we have always had fencing around the property, and we will be recreating that. The building that you see to the left in the on the right-hand photo is on the development site, and that building has been demolished. So most of the development site is now vacant. If we can go to the next slide, please. So these are just overall elevations, 25th Street on the top, 5th Avenue on the bottom, showing the site boundary and the area of the landmark designation. We are in the process, the cemetery is in the process of restoring the greenhouse. So a lot of our existing condition photos show the sidewalk shed, which is unfortunate, but the end result will be amazing. Next, please. So on the left is a view looking north on 5th Avenue. The green sidewalk shed that you see there is where the greenhouse is. The taller sidewalk shed is in front of an adjacent row house building that is not part of the project site. On the right, you see the view looking up towards the cemetery. You can just see the gates in the background, and you can see sort of behind the sidewalk shed to the greenhouse itself. That white building, that little white building, is sort of the western edge of our development site. Next, please. And then these are some views of the ongoing restoration of the greenhouse. This has all been previously permitted and is being done under the direction of Walter B. Melvin Architects. The view on the left is looking towards the cemetery. You can see again the gates in the background. And that gutter system that you see in the foreground is the basement of what's left of the one-story building that was previously demolished. And on the right is a view looking down Fifth Avenue. And next, please. And just to highlight this basement, which is an odd thing to highlight, but the building, the one-story building, wood frame building, was previously permitted for demolition and has been demolished. The commissioners may remember that there was a prior application for the education center, which actually envisioned using parts of that basement. We now no longer want to use the basement. It doesn't serve a purpose, and it will be needed for landscaping. So we are proposing to remove that. And of course, the removal of the building and the removal of the basement opens up that whole west side of the greenhouse to be visible and make it part of the courtyard for the Education and Welcome Center. And next slide, please. So I will hand it off to Stephen here. These are really the important views, we think, because they show the relationship of the cemetery to the greenhouse, and the views from which you will, from the Welcome Center looking up to the cemetery on the left, and from the cemetery looking down in the context of where we will see the new building. So Stephen, please take it away.
Okay, thanks, Ward. And I'm going to just walk you through quickly the overall design, so you have a context for the area that you are reviewing. And we have a simple strategy. You can see this isometric shows the existing conditions right now. Really what we're trying to do is create a backdrop, a visual backdrop for the greenhouse. And so where we are connecting to the greenhouse, we're adding a one-story piece that connects to it with a green roof, because you do see it from above, from the upjohn arch. That's one story. So really you can read the three-dimensional quality of the greenhouse when you're going north on Fifth Avenue and all the way around. And then around that, putting sort of a rich landscape, working with Michael Van Valkenburg on this, that really brings some of almost that romantic nature of the cemetery around the greenhouse. And also, since we can't have green in the greenhouse, since we're using it as multi-purpose space, you have the sort of green right around it. And that also starts to define an entry court right here. So the bulk of the building is on 25th Street, but there is a new facade that wraps all the way around onto the party wall and onto 25th. And this is really, a lot of this is set up on views, because for educational purposes, we want views to the greenhouse and also up the hill from exhibition spaces. And so we sort of carefully crafted that within the building, both looking down and looking up, so you understand the connection. The cemetery, as you probably know, has incredibly rich history of architecture and sort of rich materials. The upjohn gate on the left. And so we really wanted to sort of tie in materially in terms of a sort of something that both reads both modern and ties in with that history. Of course, on the site, it's a little bit more prosaic. These are existing photos of the materials around the existing site, and then the greenhouse itself with its copper roof, the sort of green painted structure and the brick. What we're looking at using is a glazed terracotta as a primary material, and glass. And this is sort of a material board, a glazed terracotta that's almost a aubergine or eggplant colored. I was hoping we could do this in person, because I have actually a suit that matches this color. Accidentally, I didn't pick the color of the building from the suit. And then a bronze window mullions cast stone, sort of a warm charcoal cast stone. And we think that will go really well with when the top of the greenhouse starts to age to the sort of acid green, and then the green color in the brick that will complement each other well. So you can see a view from the entry arch. This is looking across Fifth Avenue, 25th Street's right here. You can see the new facade that's also a party wall wrapping around with the landscape around that, mostly glazing with a baguette system here. Now I'm looking across 25th Street. This is the entry courtyard right here. Sort of the main galleries are here. So you walk in at the space between the greenhouse, looking into that entry courtyard, a curved path that negotiates. There's an 18-inch difference from here to the front door. So that negotiates that difference in the ADA. way, and sort of the new fence wrapping around, which you can see here. We're making some references, some of the datum lines on the facade itself. There's a sort of basically a patterning of a chamfered terracotta fins that are on the facade, and then the entry vestibule that goes onto the landmark site right here. This is a dark brown anodized aluminum plate and window system. You can see the landscape on either side. This is the one story, and this is the party wall beyond. And then just a quick view of that corner, just giving an idea of that terracotta, how that system, where it's sometimes open, sometimes closed. And these are all chamfered at an angle one way or the other, so they catch light differently. So the specific things that are on the site, let's start with the landscape. It's basically, the landscape is we're trying to really make a rich landscape on the entry garden that plays off with the simplicity of the building, and again ties into the greenhouse with the cobblestone and natural stone setting. The curve gets us the length we need with a series of benches, rolled concrete curb. Some of the plantings that wrap all the way around. The shrubs are going to be cloud pruned, which is a new thing I learned about from Matt Oransky at MVDA, and some quirky, really interesting trees that are being picked for this as well. I'm pretty excited about that. The fence is very simple, wraps around here, crosses over the property line here and here. And it has gates built in, which are really egress for the space. The fence is a simple picket fence. The pickets are slightly angled to refer to the angles of the terracotta, front face of the terracotta on it, on a simple spacing. That's going to be a dark gray color. And then in here, there's entry signage. Some of it's built in. We're working with Abbott Miller on the pentagram on this. The entry sign is a metal powder coated sign in a putty color with gunmetal edges that will be similar to the color of the fence. They're around 5 inches tall, 1 inch deep. You can see that here. And then the letters are actually extruded slightly at an angle. Again, same reference as the fence. And then the vestibule itself, which is 9 feet tall, clad in the parts that are protruded, freestanding, are clad in the dark bronze anodized aluminum, trying to keep that as sort of very minimal as possible. And then just back to the site plan. So basically we protrude just a hair over 9 feet onto landmark site, just from the front of the building. It's just under 14 feet wide. Here's the landscape, here's the boundary. We punch through a 10-foot, 6-inch wide into the greenhouse through the existing brick wall. And I will end it right here to see if people have questions.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, do we have any questions for the applicant or, okay. All right, so, oh yes, I see some questions. So we'll start with Commissioner Chapin, followed by Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Yeah, I was wondering from the Greenwood Center, from the classroom or the lobby, if you can get a view of that side of the greenhouse. Is that just a wall, or are there?
Where the 1-story addition connects is an existing brick wall. And
right, and I think the historic photograph showed that historically there was a building that abutted it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yes, yes. And that is the one side of the greenhouse that is masonry. If you look on page 12, you can see a picture of that brick wall, but it's just a plain brick wall.
Yeah, that was demolished, the previous building. Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Shamir Baran.
Just clarify, I think I'm understanding, but you are not, are you proposing, or you seem not to be proposing any entries into the building from 25th Street or Fifth Avenue. It's all from the sort of the interior corner, in the inside corner.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
There are two existing entries into the greenhouse that will remain as entries, but they will, they may be used for special events or secondary entries, but the primary entry to the entire complex is through the courtyard.
Again, no entry into the new construction from the streets or the avenue. Okay.
Oh, no, sorry. I misunderstood you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Commissioner Gustafson.
What's the purpose of the new fencing? I'm not arguing that it should be higher, but at its current level, it's not security. What's it there for?
There was over the years, and as Ward showed in some of the historic photos, which I can go back to if you want, there has always been some fencing wrapping around it. It ended up very tall at the end, but so it's really a reference to some of the historic fencing that was there.
Okay, so no functional purpose.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, other questions?
Actually, it does. The one functional purpose it has is we don't want people rattling that front door right here, and so it's a way to sort of direct people to through the entry courtyard into the building.
Thank you.
Commissioner Devonshire.
Why do you feel you need so much signage on the front of the thing?
I think there's a concern with Greenwood that people make the connection between the education center and the cemetery. And so there's a concern that there's a separation because it's off the property.
And does it address different viewpoints, people coming from different directions?
Yeah, so there's a sign here, and then the larger one, which I think in the conversations really has been as much about people moving down. There's a sort of major bus line that goes down Fifth Avenue.
Okay. All right, and so only actually 2 of those signs are before us because only 2 are on the landmark site, correct?
Right. Actually, I think technically that they're not on the site. Just the return of the fence.
Yeah, I think that the fences return onto the landmark site, but the perimeter fence itself actually sits on the outside the property line. But
okay.
Obviously the signage has been intentionally designed, and Pentagram did a number of studies looking at grave markings and fonts and lettering and stuff like that. So that was some of the derivation of the design of the lettering itself.
Okay. And
that lettering was inspired by some of the lettering on gravestones.
Stephen, do you want to talk to that?
It was. I mean, there's a. I'm not going to be able to speak typography as well as Evan Miller, my wife, who's a graphic designer. But yeah, I mean, there's a sort of a chunkiness, this blocky typefaces that I remember Evan Miller and Pentagon showing us all these precedents for, and sort of taking that, and even the little dash that has a different word out of how that works. So we were trying to make that type of connection and designing. Really, it's a custom typeface for this.
There is signage at the entrance vestibule itself, which is on the landmark site, but I think all the other signage technically is off.
okay.
That's
All right.
correct.
And can we just, is there a rendering that shows the entrance vestibule, since it's really the vestibule, the returns of the fences and the paving that are before us?
Yeah,
correct.
Okay, and do you have one that pulls out more? There we go. Yeah.
There we go.
You can understand
this more
it.
or less shows all the pieces.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? And just remind me, what's the paving material where these benches are and the curb around the planters?
There's a cobblestone paving.
Okay, and the white?
And the white is a rolled concrete curb and a
Okay.
cast concrete custom bench.
Okay. All right, so I think we don't have any other questions at this time. We may have more after we listen to testimony, but let's turn it over to Anthony Fabre to take us through the testimony. And if you're a member of the public and would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand so we can identify you, which is a button you can find at the bottom of your screen. And we will we'll go through anyone who signed up in advance and then get to anyone else. So Anthony, do you want to take us through the testimony?
Yes, the first person that I've brought in is Diego Roballo from the Historic Districts Council. So Diego, you can go ahead and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Diego Roballo from the Historic Districts Council. Overall, the committee was pleased with the restoration work to the rear greenhouse and the differential quality of the new building, which we understand is not part of the application. We felt, however, that the typeface chosen for the rear building signage is at odds with the delicacy of the restored greenhouse and the adjacent new structure. The new building works hard to provide a reserved and elegant backdrop for the rear greenhouse. The proposed signage overwhelms and disrupts this otherwise lovely project. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We do not have any other signups for this item, and I do not see any other hands raised.
Okay, great. And I'll note for the record that Brooklyn Community Board 7 sent a resolution that is strongly in support of the application and recommends with excitement the full approval. Okay, do you want to, I'm going to turn back to the applicant and see if you want to address the signage since it was raised in testimony as well.
Yes, I'll start and maybe Stephen can finish up.
Okay.
I think we already talked about it a bit. Pentagram, who's the designer here, did do a whole series of studies looking at the cemetery and the like. The signage, I think, is important in terms of connecting this new education and welcome center with the cemetery itself. We are off the cemetery site, but now we'll be part of the cemetery. So having the signage is important. The font itself, I think, I'm not sure actually if HDC was concerned more with the font style, which I'm not really qualified to talk about. But as I said, Pentagram did do a number of studies that we don't have in this package here. But in terms of the amount of signage and the placement of signage, I think that's been very deliberately done. Some of it is similar to, I think, what we see at other museums and cultural institutions in the city.
There was one other part of the discussion which I forgot about until now, is if you look at any of the views, maybe the main view across Avenue, that there's signage on top of the greenhouse, right? So there's a large sign that's the historic sign. So part of it was also trying to understand how you balance the identity tying in with Greenwood Cemetery when you have the historic identity and historic signage on top of the greenhouse, and sort of a little bit of the confusion. I mean, the weir is beautiful. It's really cool, strange, quirky thing. But that was part of that discussion as we were working through it.
Okay. Right. And I think actually in one of your historic photographs, there was not only the sign on top, but the sign on the adjacent building as well. So in a similar location to what you're proposing on your building.
And we are this is an industrial area with a lot of signage on surrounding buildings now, and sort of keeping the identity and keeping the relationship to the cemetery very clear is an important branding decision.
Okay. All right, commissioners, any final questions? All right, we're going to begin our discussion. So commissioners, I'm requesting to unmute you. And Commissioner Lutfi, would you make a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Thank you. Commissioner Goldblum, would you second that motion?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, so the hearing is now closed and we'll begin our discussion. And, I want to thank the applicants for, sort of comprehensive presentation to show us the extent of the full design. But the components before us that we should focus our discussion on are the removal of that sort of foundation just to the right of the greenhouse to allow for the courtyard paving and planting design. Then it's the paving within that courtyard. It is the new entrance vestibule for the new building. And it's the return of the fences, the black metal picket fences. So it's an odd thing to comment on 4 very discrete parts of what is otherwise an entire project, but we'll do our best. Commissioner Shamir Barron, would you like to start this one?
Sure. The fact that we are commenting on the new entrance and courtyard at the courtyard and the pathway means that I suppose it's all right for me to weigh in on this. I actually think that the approach of putting the entry in this supposed courtyard is the wrong way at this. I mean, I think that the interest of the historic condition, and I realize that this is a little bit, on some parts, I'm sort of not supposed to be weighing in, I think, or opining on this issue, but I feel like I have to, since we have to consider the courtyard entrance piece. So I actually think that the historic condition of buildings on either side of this corner around the greenhouse element with their fronts onto the street and avenue were the correct sort of way in and orientation and kind of relationship of buildings framing this historic glass piece, greenhouse piece at the corner. And so I actually think that this entrance in the courtyard is sort of, it's not the kind of the furthest expression of the picturesque. It's like the furthest expression of it gone wrong. And it would have, it feels like a sort of an old industrial park or like a suburban solution. It's sort of the wrong solution. So I feel like the solution overall is not the right one. I mean, there certainly could be kind of a courtyard there and a greenway there, or a green area there, and landscaping and pathway to a kind of a secondary situation or something else. But this kind of the entry at the inside of that courtyard is, in my mind, not the right approach here. I can sort of understand, even though I find it jarring, the Greenwood Cemetery, the typography for that was determined and designed by Pentagram. I kind of get the quirkiness of it, the brand that it's trying to establish, the kind of the hip newness of it, but I do think it's odd and somehow not quite right, but maybe right because it's not quite right. So I kind of get that. But I have to say that I do have a problem, and also with the kind of the material of the entry courtyard, whereas the material of the building is actually very interesting. I find that this anodized aluminum brown is strange in this condition.
Okay, all right, and and I completely appreciate the sort of thinking about the building was historically framed by other buildings, and so the courtyard entry is kind of historically not sort of maybe not consistent with that historic development pattern here. I mean, one thought I had about it is that by doing this, it allows the sidewall to be exposed of the greenhouse and to be kind of appreciated and embraced by the new building. And so because the new building and the greenhouse are all going to be now part of sort of one visitor center and with a shared sort of program inside and a shared expression, I actually think that sort of the courtyard entrance kind of melds the two and brings them together to kind of reflect the embracing of the greenhouse into Greenwood Cemetery's plans here. So I have a kind of different take on that, but I do appreciate the thought that you had. And I think the piece of the entrance that we're looking at is sort of, again, a kind of discrete piece that bumps out. And so I understand the comments on the anodized aluminum. While it may relate to the new building, it's sitting on the landmark site, and just do the proportions and configuration relate sufficiently to the landmark. And
Yes.
I think, I think sort of the proportions of it do, but I agree that there could be some detailing or finish changes that help it sort of continue to embrace the greenhouse. Commissioner Gustafson.
Let's start with the most obvious. Removing the foundation that's still there obviously is not a problem whatsoever. Again, I guess now I'm commenting on something that's not on the site, but we often see new buildings being built near our individual landmarks, and most often we are struggling with how the new buildings overwhelm the landmark. And here, I think there's it actually, I think maybe this is something you were saying, Chair Carroll, is it actually focuses attention on the landmark and embraces it rather than overwhelming it. The paving and the pathway are fine, and I really don't have a problem with either the location or the if others want to tweak the design of the entrance, that's fine. I'm a little confused about I think in our materials it said we were commenting on the signage. However, if I'm to understand what the applicant said, there isn't any signage on the landmark site.
Except for at the entrance vestibule.
At the entrance vestibule, right, which, and again, I'm not terribly concerned about that. I think it's fine. So I guess that makes all of the fencing in the, I guess that's either DOT's problem or, because it's not on the, I guess we would have designed this to be the tax lot, right? So, so it's just the fence that runs from that Greenwood sign back to the building. Is that
correct?
Correct. Some part of that. So I don't think we can quibble with that. So that's it. I think it's approvable. I would approve it as is, and I'd go along with any tweaks anybody wants to put on that on the entrance.
Okay, great. Commissioner Lutfi.
I think John covered a lot of how I feel. I think the removal of the foundation to allow for the courtyard is fine. I don't have a problem with the fence. I want to say about the, I actually don't have a problem with the entranceway. It kind of, in a way, mirrors like the entranceway into the cemetery. You walk in and then you finally get to the, that entry building that you have to go through. And I think it works. I do think Adi was right. I have a little bit of a problem with the brown. Somehow is almost too close to the color of the building, and maybe it should just be the color of the building or something else. It almost looks like a mistake to me. And the signage, I do think these letters are a little too blocky. I don't have a problem that it's a sans serif face. I also think the fence ID sign is just too big. I mean, I believe that's about a 4-foot span, and I'm not sure of why it can't all be, if there's going to be something there, why can't just be on one line? So it's smaller. There are 2 other there are two other signs on this building, and the one in front of the entrance, which is set back, is a 6-foot span. So this seems rather large to me right on the street.
Right. And just again, to clarify, those signs on the fences are not before us. They're off the landmark site. So, and we typically don't actually comment on the typeface. It's really more about the size and material and placement of signs. So I think we're looking at the sign at the entrance vestibule, and I think we should focus on it in terms of its size and materiality.
Okay, well, that's, so then could I say take it under advisement? I'm not commenting.
Okay. All right. Yep. Okay. Commissioner Bland.
I want to start by saying that as the chairman of another historic Brooklyn cemetery, I want to acknowledge and celebrate really the pathway that Greenwood is establishing for the country as it begins to interpret what a cemetery is in the middle of a city in the 21st century. It's no longer just a place to bury bodies as it has been. It's a whole new world to celebrate open space, land, trees, birds, astronomy, all the rest of it. And Greenwood in this case is making an extraordinary gesture. What cemetery in the whole country is making a cultural community center? It's amazing. And I think this is an amazing design. I know that we can't comment on most of it, unfortunately, but I wanted to take a countrywide view of the whole thing before I then am able to comment on the few little aspects that we can comment on. And I also wanted to just, with a little bit of tongue in cheek, say, I don't think you all are getting the color. The color is brilliant. The green for the weir, and then the brown is wood, green wood, get it? So this is really a wonderful improvement on a design that was brought forth to us a number of years ago. And I'm sorry it's taken so long to get to where you want to go, but I think you're in such a great direction now. So the few things that we do comment on is the entry. And unlike Adi, I think this is an adaptive reuse project, and I think therefore you can look at it in a completely new and different way, because the use has completely changed. The nature of what the greenhouse is and will be used for is a different thing entirely. So I accept that this is a good entrance, a good solution to surround and separate the new from the old. With regard to the few elements that we're able to comment on, I think the sort of conceit of a picturesque entrance with the curve is clever and beautiful. And I think these curbs and seat walls are also beautiful and appropriate. The cobbling additionally gives you that impression or feeling, kind of a conceit, let's admit, because it's so small, but nonetheless of a picturesque idea, which of course the whole cemetery is. And then if we can comment on a vestibule, but not the building, I guess it's a beautiful vestibule with appropriate lettering. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Chen.
I think Commissioner Bland said it all. The only thing I would add, even though it's not about it's really fascinating to look at the future of cemeteries. And the only thing I will add is also the historic context. As we, besides the cultural, there's so much history in these cemeteries, including the one that he serves on right now, that is could be really a future topic for research. But in terms of this case, I think it is appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Devonshire?
I will not comment on the looks more appropriate on a football jersey than on a building signage. I think the building itself becomes enough of a background building that it actually is quite appropriate. The paving, I think, is appropriate. I think that the curvy walk to the vestibule is a little contrived. And I've got problems with that, but it's not a deal killer. I think the fence is okay. And I think removal of the foundation is okay.
Okay. And Commissioner Goldblum?
Okay, cool project. I kind of agree with Adi that the entrance is in the wrong place for, I mean, the funny thing about this application is that it's the building belongs to Greenwood, which is across the street and which is a different landmark. And we're being asked to judge it relative to the greenhouse, which is its own landmark. So it's kind of a, you know, is it relating, you know, it relates to the to the cemetery? Does it relate to this building? It's an interesting kind of puzzle and problem. But I do agree that in a way, this courtyard and all this signage is a problem of their own making, because let's face it, you know, if you get dropped off at the bus in front of the main entrance to Greenwood and you're looking for the entrance to this thing, you're going to have a hard time finding it because it's not readily apparent. But that's their problem, I guess. I think that it's an interesting question for us legally, how to work with this. The reason that the fence and the signage and the digital totem, et cetera, are not covered by landmarks protection is because they're really happening on the sidewalk that's on the public way in front of the property line, which strikes me as like an interesting loophole. You know, if anybody wants to go in a district where you're allowed to do this kind of revocable consent fencing, you know, in the public way, could you thereby circumvent landmark review like this is doing? I think it's curious. It's interesting. It's an interesting legal question that, you know, here I don't think it's being done in a particularly objectionable way. But if you think about it, you know, there are many situations where stuff that we usually administer happens in front of the property line. And it might even be the case for townhouses where, you know, where the areaway extends beyond the property line, but we still govern how it's handled. I mean, I think that the intent of the designation was to cover the front of the building, and the fact that this fence is on the public way is kind of using a loophole that I don't think is something that we should perpetuate. However, I think that the fence is fine. I think I agree with Michael that the text is peculiar, but it's not our problem. And then to the walkway, I think that the curvy thing is fine. The paving is fine. I find the color peculiar. I don't know why they're doing it in white when you know neither the building nor the cemetery seems to revel in high contrast materials. But I don't think it's a deal killer. I think the vestibule has virtually no relationship to the landmark that we're looking at, but it's unobtrusive. I don't think it detracts from the landmark. Therefore, I think it would be appropriate. I wish that they had gone to a little bit more effort to relate to it besides some governing lines, which don't really read too strongly in reality. And I'm very grateful that we're on Zoom and that we didn't get to see Mr. Cassell's purple suit.
Thank you, Commissioner Chapin. Diana, are you with us? Can you unmute? You're muted.
Yeah, got it.
Okay.
I think that removing the basement is fine. I think that the design of the fencing, and I'm confused if we're doing the fence
It's
at
just
all.
it's the black picket metal fence that returns back.
Yeah.
The
Okay,
side.
so as far as the signage is concerned on the building, that is appropriate. I think that in general, actually the signage, because you need markers to both they want to show the connection to Greenwood, but they also want to direct you to the center instead of having you go into the Greenwood Cemetery looking for the center. So I can understand the prominence of the signage in general. I guess the landscaping, I think, is appropriate enough as a setting which is not intrusive, and I think the winding path is soft. And I think the only thing that looks a little jarring is the white, which will probably not be very, if it is that white, as in the rendering, will probably not stay that way very long. So that's not probably a big issue. So I can find everything appropriate here.
Okay. All right. So, and I think, Michael, I appreciate your comments about the, work off the landmark site and what does that mean for other landmarks. And I think I would say that in historic districts, the vast majority of the buildings that we regulate are in historic districts. And in historic districts, we do regulate the sidewalks. So we would always have jurisdiction. And then I think, in the case of individual landmarks, where something falls outside of the property line, it's within the public sidewalk, subject to other jurisdictions. But I think we see this more often with institutions. So, for example, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, has signage that falls outside of the landmark site. So, I think it isn't such a prevalent problem, and usually is always associated with something that where we do have some input. So, and always, I think, under another city's jurisdiction, if that gives you any comfort. But I do want to circle back now to the application. And I do want to first just, commend the Greenwood for pursuing this project. This is something we've seen for a long time. And I can remember this greenhouse, decades ago, with the big fence in front of it that was in violation and falling into disrepair. And I think it's just amazing that it is being so restored so beautifully, and will really be the gem that was intended by the designation, and will really be kind of recognizable on this corner, and will be appreciated. So I want to thank Greenwood for undertaking this restoration and giving it a home and a use that's connected to the cemetery across the way. That and I do think that historically they've always had a connection to continue to have there be some legible connection between these two buildings, I think makes sense. And the fact that the one building relates to the cemetery as well. So I think, this is very exciting. And I can't wait to see this work continue and the restoration continue, and this be an active part of Greenwood Cemetery's programming. And with that said, I agree with the majority of you all that these discrete aspects that are before us are limited in scope and don't detract from the individual landmark and are approvable. So Commissioner Gustafson, would you make this motion?
Sure. In the matter of LPC 22-01811, 749 Fifth Avenue, the Weir Greenhouse, now McGovern Weir Greenhouse, an individual landmark, the application to remove the remainder of a previously demolished building adjoining the greenhouse, and to install portions of fencing and a new entrance courtyard, pathway, and vestibule associated with new fencing and signage, and new building located off the landmark site. I note that the vast majority of the project is occurring off the landmark site, including almost all of the new building, fencing, and signage. However, I note that the courtyard and small entry vestibule to the new building will be on the landmark site, and the new building will be internally connected to the designated greenhouse. I recommend approval, noting that the remainder of the ancillary structure to the west of the greenhouse does not contribute to the architectural and historic significance of the greenhouse, and therefore its demolition will not eliminate significant fabric or architectural features. That the segments of modern black painted metal fencing located on the landmark site will be simple in design and will not call undue attention to itself. That the new entrance courtyard featuring substantial plantings and a concrete and stone curvilinear pathway will relate well to the designated greenhouse structure in terms of materials, design, and placement. That the massing and siding of the new building, for which only the entrance vestibule is to be built on a small portion of the landmark site, and otherwise wraps the perimeter of the landmark site. Features a simple rectilinear form that will frame and preserve views of the more dynamic historic greenhouse, and that the work will not diminish the special architectural and historic character of the individual landmark.
And Commissioner Bland, would you second that motion?
Second.
All right, Mark, will you call the vote?
Chair Carroll,
Aye.
Commissioner Bland,
Aye.
Commissioner Shamir Barron, Commissioner Barron,
Aye.
Commissioner Chapin,
Aye.
Commissioner Chen,
Aye.
Commissioner Devonshire,
Aye.
Commissioner Goldblum,
Aye.
Commissioner Gustafson,
Aye.
Commissioner Lutfi.
Aye.
With 9 in favor, none opposed, the motion passes.
All right, so that's approved. Thank you and good luck. And the commissioners, that is our last item before lunch. So we will break for lunch now and we'll come back at 1:45. So we will ask the members of the public who are in the meeting to exit the meeting at this time and then re-enter at 1:45. And commissioners, you just need to turn your audio and video off, and see you all in a half an hour. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.